That is basically what Satoshi found when he discovered Bitcoin. You can view it as an element without protons or neutrons. So this is an element without mass. The information about the element is the element, since it's a purely informational element. Amidst the fiat decadence, Satoshi introduced a system, simple and elegant, designed to destroy seigniorage from ever becoming again prevalent. This allows the individual to shield his efforts from the states of malevolence. We're able to build on the base layer of humanity's latest element, Bitcoin. That was kind of fun, Terence. You want to give a shout out to the guy who produces that?
Yeah, that's Richard. I don't know Richard's last name.
Real Richard, I think he goes by. Let's do one quick. This one's only a few seconds, but I listened to this morning too. So we'll do one more and then. What are you trying to tell me? I can sell my Bitcoin for millions one day? No, Neo. I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to. Where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In a world of fiat currency. You gotta stack the motherfuckers. You're against Bitcoin, you're against freedom. Yeah, so there's that. Just an FYI, we get permission, even though we don't have to technically, because this is all on these open forums like this, from all these guys to play their songs. So good stuff, man. Good morning, Terence, sir.
How's it going?
You
I
know,
see.
not too shabby. How about you?
I'm good. I see we survived the tariffs so far.
Did
Day
we?
two.
I thought we're still crashing.
Well, yes, but we're still here. Bitcoin isn't.
We as in
Bitcoin's in the
Bitcoin.
80s,
Yeah,
my
yeah. I
friend.
meant the stock market is
I'm
still
I'm a Bitcoiner.
not
I don't know
looking
what you.
pretty.
I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah, yeah.
realize you
No.
were saving your wealth in restoration hardware.
Well
Um,
said. Well said. That's why we're here, guys. Keep each other in check. That's what community is all about.
and we've
Who's
got Puncher up here as a
Puncher?
co-host. I see Thomas, Dark,
Man.
Jamie.
Oh, there was a guy, Jamie. Who was it? Jamie Miner. Jamie, are you the guy?
I'm the guy.
Oh man, I'm glad you made it, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, Jamie. So, listen, why don't we talk about markets and really quick? I'm eager to hear what Dark, Thomas, and Robert have to say about kind of where we are, and then maybe we can. How much time do you have, Jamie? You
Yeah, I'm
with us
here. I'm
for a
here for
little
the
bit?
duration. Yeah, I'm here for the
Outstanding.
duration.
Outstanding, bud. Okay. Hey, I just want to turn it over to Robert. Robert, can you give us a little kind of where you think we're headed and the big picture and the macro environment? I'm always eager to hear what you have to say, and I think you're spot on.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, guys. So the tariffs were, I was expecting tariffs, as everyone knows, pretty supportive of it, but I wasn't really expecting the tariffs to be that severe, that hawkish. And yeah, the response or the reaction has been pretty brutal. I wasn't trading seriously throughout the COVID crash, but like that's basically the last time that that things were this bad. Credit spreads are blowing out. High yield corporate bonds, versus treasuries, versus investment grade corporate bonds, even SOFR Fed funds spread, that is starting to blow out. VIX and volatility is today. Yesterday it was pretty elevated, but today it's much more elevated.
Robert, can you explain to the uninitiated what you say, when you say blowing out?
Just usually when credit spreads start to widen, meaning increasing risk, usually when that starts to happen, it's kind of like unemployment, where it doesn't just gradually, steadily climb. Usually it just goes parabolic. It just, it goes from going sideways to just straight up. And so that's what credit spreads are starting to do now. They're still tight. Kind of historically speaking, they're still relatively tight, but the direction of travel is clearly sharply higher, indicating credit stress, liquidity issues, increased risk, uncertainty, kind of all those things. Treasury yields are down pretty sharply across the curve. The 2-year, 10-year, 30-year, like the past 2 days is just falling off a cliff. The 10-year is now below 4%. And the 2-year is pricing in like 3 cuts. So the bond market is clearly expecting kind of lower growth. And Jay Powell's actually speaking right now. But I'm sure I'll catch a headline if he says something notable. But yeah, like it's pretty panicky out there today. S&P 500 and NASDAQ. China announced retaliatory tariffs. This was kind of the first major thing that I was watching for was, okay, well, when do the retaliation, when does that start? And that happened this morning. China announced a 34% retaliatory tariff against us. And so, everything sold off. S&P opened like, I think 3.5% lower, just a huge gap down. And it's just continuing to go. Like usually when that happens, NASDAQ or S&P, usually they try and fill the gap. Usually there's kind of a bit of a bounce to at least attempt to fill that gap. But today it's been basically just straight down, ever since open, like it was yesterday, where we closed at the low, which is never a good sign if you're long or bullish. Oil is making a huge move. Oil is down 6% today, down into the mid 60s. And today the dollar is pretty sharply higher. Yesterday the dollar was down like 2.5% at one point. So there's definitely like a lot of volatility. Correlations were elevated, and correlations basically tell you like it compares the volatility of an index, right? Like the S&P 500 versus the implied volatility of the components. So Apple, Microsoft, and basically the implied correlation as it moves higher, that's indicating kind of increased uncertainty. You might have heard the saying, when correlations go to 1, that's basically the kind of day where everything just gets sold. Everything, no matter if it's gold, Bitcoin, right? Something that's not even really affected by tariffs, everything just gets sold. And implied correlations were sharply higher yesterday, and then today again, they're moving even higher. So that indicates to me that this is just kind of a widespread uncertainty, widespread volatility. I'm sure that there's some margin calls, and issues with issues on kind of on a deeper level. But yeah, pretty crazy times. I would point out that like for Bitcoin, one thing I think that I've been noticing the past couple of days is if you take Bitcoin and divide it by NASDAQ, that basically shows you the relative performance. If Bitcoin is outperforming NASDAQ, that line goes up, and vice versa. Bitcoin has actually been holding up like it looks really strong versus NASDAQ, like really strong. So we've always talked about that correlation. And like, when does it eventually break? I think it could be pretty soon, because if you look at that Bitcoin over NASDAQ chart, it's really strong. Bitcoin over gold, not as strong, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll tick that one off later.
Yeah, I
But
noticed
yeah,
earlier, Robert, that early when the first announcement came out from China, the gold ripped higher, probably like 20, 31, 36. It's subsequently sold off with everything, as you said. But interesting that the knee-jerk reaction was for it to shoot higher. I will say, and you can talk to this a little bit, Robert, because I did hear you on Danish's space earlier. These guys are mostly traditional TradFi traders, and they're screaming like stuck pigs about, how stupid Trump is and he's an idiot. But then I have my buddies who are just regular row house tradesmen who think it's great. Even though their 401k might be taking a hit, they feel like maybe they're being heard for once. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. The kind of ideological or policy, moralistic, I would even say, that side of things, like, I think is important. I try to not be political, certainly not be partisan, but like a lot of people are. And unfortunately, given the volatility that we've been seeing and kind of the more traditional markets like the stock market, you have a lot of people just like their partisanship is starting to come out. And I think it's a mistake. Personally, I think that this is great. Like, I think that, we know that the top 10% own 93% of stocks in the US stock market. 93% of the stocks that are crashing, 93% of that is owned by just the top 10%. And so this is it kind of I don't want to say exclusively, but like disproportionately affecting wealthy people. So it makes a lot more sense when you turn on CNN and it's wall-to-wall coverage about the stock market. These anchors are getting paid 7-8 figure salaries, and their bosses are making even more, right? They have board of directors, right? Like shareholders. So we know the media conglomerate is kind of this whole thing. And so that starts to make a lot more sense, that we kind of how the media is framing it. And then it starts to make a lot more sense when you, in the financial world, when you realize like some of these guys that are really upset, like they have like, tens of millions of dollars long, and they really had no reason to hedge. Everything was great for the past couple years and everything just went up. And like, my guess is a lot of people are getting caught out with the volatility over the past month or so. And yeah, like, if you're an average American, sure, you might have, someone, I was having a discussion argument with someone who pointed out that like, 63% of Americans own the stock. And I said, okay, but what's the average ownership? Like $52,000. And so, okay, so the average American has $50,000 in the stock market. That's not even like a year worth of living expenses, at least here. Like that's nothing. Like the people that are really getting hurt are the wealthy. And like personally, I'm not. I told my family and people I know to not be exposed to risk, and especially treasury bonds and the U.S. stock market. I've been saying that for months. Like so. I tried to warn the people and close to me, but like I think the average American just wants real wage gains. I think the average, young person just wants to be able to afford a house. I think so like perspective is important. And I think the insanity of how stretched everything got in valuations, concentration, right? Like 60% of global equity market cap was US stocks. The market cap to GDP was like 210%. It took 200 hours of the average hourly wage to buy one share of the S&P 500. That is a record. You just go down the list. I made a post with the with the list of all the things, but employment, right? Like the jobs market, everything was just so like totally screwed up, that, I think the average American just wants an economy that benefits them. And look, like, this is not going to be quick. This is not going to be easy. This is not going to be painless, and it's not going to be cheap. But, and I hope that the American people have some tough skin, thick skin and appetite for a little bit of pain, because to truly do this, to truly reorder not just our country and our economy, but the global economy, this is gonna, like, strap in, because this is about to get wild. We haven't even gotten to the Mar-a-Lago Accord. We haven't even gotten to the currency wars. That this is, if this is headed in the direction that I think it's going, it's going to get even more volatile. But yeah, like the people I know, they're not talking about the stock market crash. You know why? Because they're, 28, 29 years old, living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have enough money to put in the stock market. So it's like, yeah, I think context and perspective is important. I do think it's good. Like, we got one shot to really kind of try to fix things. And yeah, it's not going to be easy, quick, painless, or cheap. But we got one shot, and otherwise, I think the road gets dark. So I'm glad they're at least trying to address some of these issues.
Yeah, and I want to get to Thomas and Dark and Macro and everybody else, but you raise a lot of interesting points there. The Wall Streeters generally wanted things to go on the same, right? And they had the Powell put, things were going great. Like you said, they were leveraged long with no, they didn't have, any kind of hedges in place, because why would you? And now that their teacup has been, disturbed, they're pissed, and but their comeback is that the technocrats are somehow controlling this White House. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And that ultimately, as AI comes in and we reshore, if that is the case, that we start reshoring manufacturing, that those jobs aren't going to come back, because it's going to be a robot with AI that's going to be taking that job, which there's merit there as well. But when you ask them, what's plan B? Like, is there a problem? Well, of course there's a problem. When you talk about Triffin's dilemma and the twin deficits and the hollowing out of the middle class, at least most of them, if they're intellectually honest, of course there's a problem. And you say, okay, what's your plan? And then it's just more, well, I wouldn't do this. There's never a plan, right? There's always, just the idea that you can just run things, kick the can forever, which isn't the case. Thomas, do you got any thoughts on this?
I'll take it if Thomas is falling asleep there,
Yeah,
Punchy.
Terence, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. So Robert, I mean, great analysis. What I would have thought Bitcoin, based on the way it's been performing in the past, would have dropped. Its market price would have dropped on the tariff news, and the fact that it didn't, I was impressed. But honestly, I was also surprised. I'm also glad that is basically all I hold, because we're at the range now that we were before the tariffs were even happening. Like, we've been in this range for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Um, but based on everything you said, I will eat less avocado toast for a while, because I need to do my part to help out.
Hey, can I jump in real quick too, and just add on to something that
That doesn't sound like Robert's
Nope.
voice. That's weird.
sorry, my bad. No, one thing that Infra, aka Robert, was talking about was the 401ks, and this is where I used to get into it with my pops, who actually had an MBA in business and taught it in college and whatnot. But was the fact that in the 80s is when we kind of transitioned more retirement plans into 401k plans. And that actually added to the data that Robert was talking about, which is, the percentage of Americans that actually are involved in the stock market. And a big chunk of those actually came as a result of these passive 401k plans that they just blindly puked money into and trust. They still trust, and they trust these old algorithms to get into. So if you do a little bit of a deep dive, I suggest, if you're interested in that, look into that, because they're still trusting and believing in these antiquated things like, oh, you should be invested in bonds about the same equivalent of your year of age. So if you're 60 years old, you should be 60% bonds, etc. So some of these formulas are definitely outdated, and with the insanity that has ensued over the last 4 years, all of this stuff, in my estimation, should be thrown out the window, and we need to really take a good look at it. But so many people are just blindly trusting and putting money into these 401ks, and they're passively involved in the stock market, but they are counted in that equation that Robert referenced earlier.
Robert, go ahead. You got any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the average, no matter if you look, when we talk about like wealth inequality and all that kind of thing, it's mainly a story of asset holders versus non-asset holders. That's been the big story over the past 5-6 years. You could argue even going further back, but certainly the past 5 or 6 years. If you had assets, say at the start of COVID, you came out just as good, if not better, than if you didn't have assets and you worked for a living. And like we have treated here in America, we have treated capital. There's kind of in economics these two competing forces, camps of capital and labor, and different countries kind of take different approaches to who they want to prioritize and how, and it's a constant kind of discussion. But America has always, at least in my lifetime, going back to the 90s, has always prioritized capital. And you can see this with like something as simple as, well, what if you work for a living, what tax do you pay? And for me, it's like 35%, something like that, federal. And then if you hoard capital and just sit on piles of SPY and QQQ, bonds and whatever, if you hoard capital, your long-term capital gains is like 12%, 15%. So just by the kind of tax rate that the government is implementing on these different camps, we can see who is being prioritized. And this is why, one of the reasons why capital has so outperformed labor. And I think what the Trump administration is signaling, which has long been kind of my theory, is that they are going to prioritize labor, start to really, target. I mean, Besant talks about it all the time, the middle class and the disappearing middle class and kind of working people, everyday people. And I think that they really are going to take it seriously and try to rebuild, real wage gains, real purchasing power gains for the average person. There, and I've always said, there's a world where, as an example, we have 5% inflation, but the average, everyday blue collar American is getting 8% wage gains. Something like that, like it is possible during an inflationary period of time for people to actually come out ahead, even despite it. So I think that, like, generally speaking, they've made it pretty clear that they want to kind of reorient the economy away from capital. And this is backed up by kind of what they're doing with the tariffs and what they will do with the monetary reordering part that comes next. But it's, they've already announced to China, like, hey, take your money home. This is back in the end of February. Like, take your money, any money invested in our markets, take it home. Like, we don't want it. And clearly that sort of vibe started in 22 under Biden with Russia. But like, I think we're, you zoom out and I think we're starting to see a shift away from kind of all the traditional way, the traditional economic system or financial system that we've been seeing in America. I think we're seeing a shift, that some parts of it are moving very quickly. Some parts of it have been in motion. I mean, foreigners on net stopped buying foreign governments, foreign countries on a net basis, stopped buying treasuries like 10 years ago. So I think, I think it's part of a big, broad shift. We get these kinds of things, once in a generation. And I think it is possible that, the everyday American that's been pretty much brutalized by globalization for the past 2 decades, 3 decades, I think that they are going to specifically target those everyday hardworking Americans, and personally, I think it's a great thing.
Minuteman, you got your hand up.
Yes. No, I just
That's what the ladies call him. Sorry about that.
okay. No, I thought it was interesting. There was a piece that Puncher hit on earlier that I disagreed with, which is why I threw my hand up. I don't know that it's actually necessarily your view, Puncher, but it is one that I've heard stated a few times, and I just think that it's wrong. So I'll just point that out. The view is that if stuff comes back, it's going to be nothing but AI and robotics running everything. And it's just laughable to me. Anybody that says that has no experience actually working in industry at all. If you go to any factory, any power plant, any mass manufacturing facility that is still in the US, you will find it largely devoid of AI and robotics outside of some certain specific things. But for the most part, it's people just going around doing stuff, right? Like, especially the new plants that I go to, they've got thousands of people employed there. And there is no quick way to automatically automate and AIify everything. So I just think it's a laughable idea that if stuff gets brought back to the US, there won't be more jobs here because there absolutely
So
will
that's
be.
not, yeah, yeah, and that's not my viewpoint. Although I will say that as time goes by, that is the reality of the epic we are heading into. However, that's the argument that was being made on other spaces about why that's a fool's errand and these jobs aren't going to come back. I will agree that it's going to take some time. You don't rebuild these factories that went away over a 30-year period overnight.
Definitely agree there. Definitely agree
Yeah,
there. It's gonna take a decade to get back to a place where you're manufacturing a lot of stuff here, but
yeah,
it's going to be
and
done with human labor, right? Like you
sure.
can't. There's not AI powered robots that are ready to just mass manufacture factories right now. If Trump just flips a switch, right?
Sure,
Like
and
it's going to be
that's why we
people.
talk about the trades here all the time. Like I'm going to tell my kids, like, get into the trades, man. You're going to be the lawyers and doctors in the future. And but one of the reasons that it's going to take time, which I think leads to some other political realities of and Robert makes the great point. Like if you listen to Lutnick, if you listen to Percent and what they're saying, they're telling you they're not hiding this plan. You just have to pay attention to their words. And I will just say that one of the reasons probably for the proposed middle. I mean, I don't know if you're making $150,000 a year adjusted or less, you're not going to pay any taxes. I think they are also meant to mitigate the burden on the middle class. That's just a political reality as well. So curious if Dark has anything to add, or and we'll switch topics and then circle back around again. But I do want to get to Jamie and talk with him. Dark, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Good news is probably only about 15 days left of this. So yeah, not sure what to
Meaning
say,
what? The
man.
Yeah,
Fed's gonna
Well,
Y15.
well, at 15 days, the markets would be near zero. So I'm definitely a zero bid for a lot of stocks. Um, I don't know, man. You know, I'm not sure what to say. Look, the one thing I will say is that trade wars are going to be good for Bitcoin, and I kind of was pointing that out with Infra a couple weeks ago that if this kind of did accelerate, I thought it would be good for Bitcoin. Um, Trade wars become currency wars. Currency wars, we're already seeing that. I mean,
become
China
hot
and
wars.
I'm sorry.
Well, eventually, they become hot wars, or at least they have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, China's issuing, retaliatory tariffs. That's a form of a currency war. Um, so I don't know. It's like just TikTok next block, right? A lot of times these tremendous price instability moves are a reflection of broken money because you go from having too much money in the system to too little money in the system, back to too much money in the system, and it leads to price instability. It leads to a lot of what we're seeing. It's weird for me because I'm at heart a TradFi guy. So when I see markets like this, it's always fascinating to me. There's not that many times in my career I've seen the VIX, substantially over 30. I mean, it happens, but it's not common.
What are we at right
And
now? Over 40, Dark?
over 40, yeah. And it's not like I want to trade the markets here. All the action is one way, and then it's going to be one way the other way. And it's like five diamond ski slope, man. It's super dangerous. That being said, it's been really cool to watch Bitcoin kind of just hang in here and not give a shit, which is the sort of dislocation from that QQQ that Infra was talking about. Um, yeah, I don't have that much to say other than just stay the course and look to get some Bitcoin in self custody. Um, Look, at some point here, somebody's going to panic. I'm not sure who, whether that's the Fed or the administration. But
Well, I think that might be, apparently Trump is talking to Powell today or soon. But I've been reading some things about Citibank and how they are not, their swaps are not adequately hedged and they're in big trouble. And I think the phone calls are going to be coming from Powell's boss, not so much from Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's going to just sit back and sit tight. Um, Europe doesn't have enough US dollars as it stands now. So I don't think the negotiation is going to be between Powell and Trump. Interesting that Powell said he can't be fired. And Trump thinks he can, but I don't think it's going to come to that. And I think they're definitely going to have to do something at the Fed. But on a broader, in a broader scope, I think they're going to try to pull all the traditional levers that used to work in the past to no avail. Right? They're doing all the traditional things. And then I think at some point, or at least I hope, Bitcoin is going to come in different ways to help ameliorate some of the problems and integrate into the traditional system through like bit bonds and things like that. But that ultimately the system is going to fail. And all that Bitcoin can do is kind of stave off some of the real pain that would happen otherwise without Bitcoin to get us to the next system. At least that's the way I think about it at a high level. Anyway, I'm done talking. I see Karan's up, and I can't see if anybody's got a hand up, but Karan, welcome.
Hey guys, I just jumped on. Sounds like we're talking about the topic du jour, tariffs. Uh, Interestingly enough, I was on Capitol Hill on Liberation Day. It just happened to coincide. We do a couple times a year. We go and sit with all of our legislators that represent the different jurisdictions and districts that we have companies in. So it was just an interesting dynamic to be in Capitol Hill, sitting with staffers, both Republicans and Democrats, on the day. This was like during the day before the 4 p.m. announcement of the Rose Garden, and man, like nobody knows what the hell's going on or how they want to react. It's Capitol Hill can be a pretty clusterfuck place. I spend way too much time there, but it just felt especially discombobulated this trip. So take that for what it's worth. I think the highlight of that trip was we actually got to sit with a couple staffers from Senator Loomis's office. Had nothing to do with any of my companies, but we took some time to just kind of go and meet with them and just kind of chat up a little bit about how things were developing with the SBR. And it seems like that office is pretty bullish for what it's worth. Since it's a Bitcoin space, I'll share that. And they were mentioning how they're pretty involved with the administration, and they're actually having a lot of conversations with Bo Hines. He apparently was leading the charge in some of the discussions. So I think Bitcoin's heading in the right direction, and I think that trade wars and tariffs. I just don't know. We have an emergency meeting on Tuesday. I'm inviting the CEOs of all of our portfolio companies down here to Miami, and we're sitting down for an 8-hour session, portfolio company by portfolio company, to try to figure out what we need to do in the short term. I think the impact of this level of instability is just like, our companies are like, we don't know if we want to deploy our capex plan for the year. We have no idea if if we need to onshore some of the demand because we don't know how long these tariffs are going to last. We have no clue right now on if we want to make some of our long-term capex investments that were tied to supply chains outside of the U.S. because all of a sudden buying from Taiwan doesn't even make sense because of the tariffs. So just interesting time to be in business, especially if you're in business that has capex needs and you're trying to build out 1 year, 2 year, 3 year spend plans. It's impossible to do it. And having said all of that, Bitcoin's acting like a risk-off asset for a change, and market's down 6% and Bitcoin's up 1%. So there's some things that just work. And Dark spot on. TikTok next block. And then it's days like today's, guys, or the weeks like that. I'm like, why do I even do this whole private equity thing? I should just buy more Bitcoin and sit and relax. My returns are better on my Bitcoin investment than any of my portfolio companies. I think it's time to retire.
You're too young to retire, and you've got too much to add to civilization,
Puncher,
Karam.
I
But
was gonna ask
yeah, but
Terence. I'm still rewinding back your use of the word ameliorated. That really got me. It's the word of the day.
that was me.
You
I said
said
that. That
that,
was me.
buddy. Like I was so impressed I had to look it up. But you also
My English be
you
good,
earned the $2 spiff for actually saying the word ameliorated in the conversation. But hey, has Karan ever
and I'm glad I didn't say postprandial diagnostication. That
Ooh,
would really
see, this
get you
guy
off.
pretends to not be that smart, but my God, there's some brains in that head of Puncher there. Hey, Karan,
Scrambled.
have you ever stated precisely what you're doing, or given the name of your company or anything like that? Because you were talking about we are doing this and whatnot. I don't know if you've stated that publicly or feel,
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I
please,
mean, I have
please.
I have my face and my actual name on Twitter, so I'm totally open to it. So, my private equity firm is called Asgard Partners. We're a lower middle market private equity firm. We buy companies, primarily North American based companies, between 4 million and 12 million in EBITDA, and pretty big focus on kind of Department of Defense and government contracting. Just quick history, my experience, like I was at JP Morgan for a while. I ran their aerospace and defense practice in New York, and part of that I sat on the cap markets desk at JP Morgan. I left there. I joined a company. I was the CEO of a large distribution platform called ADS. It was one of the larger suppliers of equipment to the U.S. military. All of our different services we sold to Army, Navy, SOCOM, all the three-letter agencies. And then in 2017, I started my private equity firm, and that's kind of what we do now. And started getting involved in Bitcoin in 2017. Had a spectacular failure at a startup. We were trying to be the first CFTC regulated exchange to do futures for Bitcoin. We were funded by SoftBank, and we were too slow and not smart enough, and others beat us to it. And the last like 3 years or so, I was spending a lot of time just kind of in the Bitcoin community and trying to mix the TradFi world and the Bitcoin world, and try to orange pill as many people as I can. So that's the quick background.
Oh, I love it, man. Thanks. Hey, Puncher.
I'm slinging bagels, man. I feel so inadequate, Karam.
Stop it.
Stop. Puncher, Thomas had hit me up on the side. He's obviously a mayor of a town doing political things and running a business on the side.
I
So
think we have a weekend at Bernie situation here. He jumps on the stage every day, but when we call on him, he's not really
he's
there.
propped up. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just this body. No, he sent me a
Thomas
message
is a
saying
good
he
man.
actually had to take a
Yeah.
business client call or something. So you may want to call on him at some point when, because I'm sure he'll be like Terrence said, he'll come back to life here in a second. But anyway, I thought I would just let everybody
Yeah,
know.
Thomas got an open
Yeah.
invitation. So I wanna shift gears a little
I'm
bit,
back. I'm
and
back now listening. I'm sorry, I got a client call before. So
no worries, Thomas, and you can jump in anytime, obviously. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Jamie. Jamie Miner and I went. I don't know. I don't even know if we went back and forth a little bit, but Jamie, and jump in anytime if you want to correct anything that I'm saying. But my impression through our little interaction was that you believe that potentially trading in altcoins or having positions in altcoins is a good way to leverage your ability to ultimately buy Bitcoin. And then obviously I think I disagree with that, and we didn't really go at it. But I said, hey, you're welcome to come up anytime and make your case, but bring your A game because you have some maxis here. And then I asked my toxic maxis to be respectful. So I'll give you the floor, and just if you want to make your case, because I think it's good, because I have some younger guys listening in. Oh, by the way, just a little house cleaning. If you guys could repost so we can get more people in the space, that'd be great. I have some younger guys who feel like because of unit bias that they missed out on Bitcoin, and older guys too, same thing. And they're chasing around the XRPs and the Doges and everything else because they feel like they missed it. And what they don't quite understand, that I try to implore them and impress upon them, is that Bitcoin is a protocol. Just like the internet was a protocol, the wheel, fire, electricity, and protocols are winner take all. Everything else is either a meme coin, which is essentially worthless, actually worthless, or a technology. And in technologies, to the extent that any of these are technologies, like say XRP or ETH or whatever, that they're winner take most, but then those are all also overtaken over time by a technology that is superior. Obviously the example there is something like MySpace that was then taken over by Facebook, which will ultimately be taken over by something someday. So technologies versus protocols, and protocols come along very, very infrequently in your lifetime, if ever. So I'll turn it over to you, Jamie. I've talked enough, and floor is yours, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really do. I don't know. I guess we were going back and forth. Punch. I saw the first thing I saw about you that you were in the Navy, and growing up in a Navy household. I just figured at least there was a basis there for some kind of respect and ethics, and I really enjoyed the spaces here. You know, I believe you guys genuinely and intentionally want to see people do well and make an impact. Um, and that's what we all want. But you guys, I just think you guys do a really, really great job in that. And I think that some of the things you brought up, Punch, about like the other people that you deal with, that chasing gains and feeling they missed out. I identify with that. I agree 100%. I think this strategy, and I put a lot of the stuff in the message in the pill. I'm not sure exactly how to make it to the top of you guys how to do that, but so you guys can at least see it. So I didn't have to kind of go over and explain it and regurgitate it. But so you
Hey,
guys,
Jamie, let me tell you how to do it. When
okay,
you're on that particular tweet,
yep,
you go down, and when you go to share that tweet, on the top, you'll see this space,
okay,
and you click on this space, and then it'll end up in what's called the nest. It took me a
all
while to
right,
figure that
all
out
right.
too.
Let's see. So and then pin. I see pin to the profile. What else is there? That's the only ones I see.
So if you click on it, right? If you click on that tweet, and on the right side, that arrow, that underscore with the arrow, right? So hit that underscore with the arrow on the far right side on the bottom of the tweet.
Got it.
And then on top, it'll say share post, and you hit Bitcoin Today, and it'll end up in the nest.
Let's see if I did it right.
All right.
Let's see if you saw that.
Sorry for the
Now let's see if I
yeah.
did that right, so it can
Good.
help. Because that way you can kind of, I don't have to go over back through. You guys can kind of see through some examples that I put in there. But
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
If you do the mechanics the way I said, it'll show up in a couple
okay,
couple
all right,
seconds.
perfect. So yeah, so that chasing and feeling you missed out, like I totally get that. I felt like that last cycle too, and you know, my first experience was coming into crypto during the pandemic, and I saw this crypto thing. I was excited about it. I've historically been a small business owner. The idea that the government could shut down my business and prevent my, how I made income for my family really scared me. And then I wanted to learn how to invest, and I've never invested before. So I paid somebody who was a professional investor in this space to teach me each week his money, in, my money in. I got to see what he did, how to do it, going safely, exit. I really want to do it from an education standpoint. I watched him with my own eyes through the process, risk $200,000, rebalancing his profits into other projects that he felt were also quality, and he ended up with about $8 million that cycle. I did the same thing. He put his 50,000 in, I had my $500. So, you know, I made money as well, but it was more about the education piece and not the idea of it. The thing, Puncher, that stood out to me that I think aligned us, which may be this opportunity, was when I heard you speak on the last space on Tuesday, where you kind of opened up the idea that maybe these are technology companies, and you know, there's an industry term for that. It's dead on balls accurate how I look at it, right? I look at all these quote unquote altcoins and traditional finance technology companies as technology companies. They're all the same to me. And rather than trying to find where they're going to be, putting a bunch of money in it, this one goes up at a different time. So then I put some money in that, and I'm constantly chasing, even on the upside. What I have iterated from what I learned from last cycle from him was, and what I've done is, I just say, for example, you put $1,000 in 20 different, you know, technology companies. In the sheet, you'll see they're all high market caps, current cycle narratives. They're not micro caps, not, you know, quote unquote shit coins and things like that. These are quality things, but I'm not looking for 10x's and 15x's to get rich. I'm looking for $1,000 to turn into $2,000. Take that $1,000 that I've grown and put it into Bitcoin along the way. What I've found is that,
Okay, then what? Let me ask you, Jamie.
yeah,
Let me ask you, what in your mind separates Bitcoin from, if we're in agreement that Bitcoin's a protocol and that what you're investing in, and I saw your spreadsheet there,
okay,
are technologies that you're investigating or, you know, looking into, and obviously doing your due diligence on. What? How do you see Bitcoin as different, and why do you see Bitcoin as where you ultimately want to get if you're able to get a multiple return on the other technologies?
okay. Well, so I've certainly learned a lot from everyone in here. Certainly, Darkside. I love the fact that that Soft Wars book that he put me on to even amplified my original feelings about Bitcoin being, you know, this super computer, cybersecurity store of value, with obviously the additional properties of money being portable, and, you know, all the things that we know about it. So to me, that's the ultimate store of value, ultimate protection from the banking rails and the central planners and the manipulation of the market, and it's tech freedom, I think, is what I think you guys have coined, like, kind of positioned it, and I really like that. So in my mind, if that's the ultimate goal, that's the ultimate asset that I could have, and I want to, I want to have I want to be a whole coiner, and I don't have a lot of money. Some of the things that Robert mentioned. Well, if I have 80,000, if I'm trying to get to 80,000, but then Bitcoin's moving to 250, by the time I get to 80, I'm not going to have enough to get to the 250. So I also noticed that.
Let me stop you
Sure.
there. So embedded in what your assumptions are there are that somehow the items on your spreadsheet are going to accrete faster than if you had just bought less than a whole Bitcoin with the same amount of money. That's got to be your underlying assumption,
Correct.
correct?
Right. And
Okay.
in doing that, like for example, like this year, like you know, just to give an example, like what I let me couple the two. What I noticed was last cycle, and again in this cycle, that although they're in the same, you know, in the same sector, okay, they're directionally aligned, but they have,
Same sector as what? I'm sorry. Same
well,
sector
the
as what?
same technology. They're, you know, Nasdaq. If you count the Nasdaq, you count the S&P 500 as a risk asset, the technology sector, crypto more isolated. You know, if Bitcoin's rising, a lot of times a lot of the other coins in the ecosystem are rising. If Bitcoin's falling, a lot of the other coins are falling harder. So there's some directional alignment. But what I noticed was that even inside this, the crypto market specifically, some coins would move directionally differently or in a greater capacity than other coins. So, for example, like this year, you know, XRP, you know, we did like a 5x while Bitcoin was going sideways. Now, you know, I know you've had Mikkel in before, and he speaks very uh, intelligently about why he's all in on XRP. I'm not, but I do recognize that it outperformed during a period of time, you know, and so
Okay, but you'd have to know that that was going to happen for it to be a smart bet. You'd have to have some asymmetric intelligence about that in some way, right? You're literally placing a bet to do that. I mean, so we agreed. Like a lot of people think that Bitcoin is the same tree but a different branch than all the other altcoins. Bitcoiners, what we understand is it's a different tree altogether. And I posted something up in the nest with it's got like what the perception and reality is
mhm,
of Bitcoin. A lot of people think it's like inside the fiat ecosphere. It's completely outside and separate and a different thing as an adopted protocol
I agree.
that's going to get stronger over time. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but
No,
say
please.
XRP. Do you have a position in XRP currently?
Yeah, small position. So
Okay.
what I'll do is an equal
So obviously
position.
you think that might
Where'd you buy it?
it doesn't matter what the size is. It doesn't matter what the size
What
is,
price?
but
What price
let
did
me
you
ask
buy
you
it at?
what yeah, go ahead, Dark.
Like,
Originally it was last cycle, it was like 22 cents. But so, you know, we're talking historically or this
I know,
or
but
right now, but like if you were to,
come on, man. Like, this
no,
this
no, no,
conversation is just insane, right? Like,
well,
this is the argument that people that trade pink sheet stocks, like the absolute bottom of the barrel, think that they can outperform people that buy the best stocks in America. It just doesn't work that way. That doesn't mean over. Look, this is a classic example of mistaking brains for a bull market, right? Like, yeah, you can get lucky, and you can get lucky for some period of time, but you'll give it all back and then some. And look,
well,
look
Doc,
at the last 4 months. If you have any portfolio of alts, you've been devastated, absolutely devastated.
I agree
Dark, I think I
100%.
want to kind of chime in on
And
that one
again,
too, and just like I used
go-
to be a big fan of this thinking, but I've changed my whole thought process for many reasons. One of which is the effort and energy that I put into that is kind of a waste because in a way you're kind of supporting other networks that are actually more rug pulls. And another one is the value is actually extracted from somewhere, whether it be a little old lady or some, whatever. We call these folks a lot of the time degens and whatnot, but they're still people and it's still value and it's being extracted from somewhere. So I don't sign off on this type of thing. Like I used to be all about like, hey, we'll go mine this altcoin and then we'll just quickly roll everything into Bitcoin. But no offense, like it's a free country and I appreciate people doing what they want to do. But I struggle. Like it's the whole, Fred Krueger and Solana argument where it's like, okay, Fred, it's fine if you want to go do that, but you're not going to come on this platform and pitch those kinds of things. I don't sign off on it. And I think a lot of other, people in the Bitcoin community also share that conviction with me. So I just, I'm just throwing my opinion out there in the ring.
yeah, Jamie, I'm not like I didn't want to bring you up here to try to like destroy you and publicly humiliate you. What I'm trying to get at is that whenever I drill into like say XRP or ETH or whatever, and I actually ask somebody who's giving me the pitch, for example, there's thousands of banks that have signed LOIs with XRP and whatever the narrative is of the day. It's just not true. And it's and even if it were, like so what? Nobody can really articulate to me the value proposition in any of these coins. It's always a future story about some future event. With XRP, it was always for years about the lawsuit and whether or not that would get rectified. And it did, which is why you saw it, shoot up from wherever you bought it to, $3 or whatever. But now it's pulled back and at one point it's going to be zero. And I want to make people aware of the fact that there is no, in almost every case, there is no underlying value proposition. And unlike Bitcoin, which everybody on this thread pretty much could tell you what it is, and you're more than likely never going to beat Bitcoin unless you're extracting value from somebody else, right? Rug pulls and all the other stuff that happens. And at the end of the day, they're not decentralized, they're not secure. They are unregistered securities controlled by somebody else who's got an agenda, and people are going to get hurt. And the idea that you should be doing that other than buying and holding Bitcoin, whether that's $100 worth of Bitcoin, or this is where we get to the unit bias, or you feel like you need to have a whole Bitcoin. In my opinion, and and by the way, I started out as a shitcoiner. I owned all of it. In 2014, I owned everything you could think of, and every time I saw 1 inch and all that other bullshit, and tuna coin and all that shit. And it dawned on me in like a flash that none of those things are what Bitcoin is, and Bitcoin is standalone and unique as a protocol. And I sold them all in 30 minutes and bought Bitcoin. Now, people come to that realization, you can come to it the way I did, or you can come to it through pain and misery and tears. But ultimately, you're going to come to that realization. And I don't want to monopolize, and I do have to jump off for some fiat business, and I'll be
Hey,
back in
hey,
half an hour.
hey,
But
Puncher, just very quickly, I just want to, and this is a genuinely intellectually curious question for Jamie, right? So, um, there's two, like, if you were going to put this on a decision tree and say, hey, let's try to kind of like structure the conversation, you could say one is philosophically, there's folks that are just completely against shitcoining, and good, bad, or indifferent. Like, I don't have an opinion for this conversation. So that's one. Just don't do it because there's degens, they're rug pull. I get that. I personally don't shitcoin, but if people want to, that's fine. And the other one is it's an economic question around is the intent simply to generate more fiat to invest in Bitcoin, right? And if that's the case, you can go get a job, you can sell shit on eBay, you can trade shitcoins. There's a lot of things you can do in order to generate fiat. So if it's in the latter category, like this is just one more way for me to generate more fiat. So eventually I can get to a higher holding of Bitcoin. Then my question, Jamie, is simply, I mean, we've been in the markets long enough, and it's kind of what Dark alluded to, is like, do you have a system that generates consistent alpha that you can say, like, hey, this is how I do it, versus saying, hey, portfolio theory, I just invest in a bunch of stuff and some of it hits, some of it doesn't. And like, so that's, to me, like, this conversation is a bit more interesting just intellectually. If it's just like, okay, yeah, like, here's what I look at, here's how I think about it, and since we brought you on this platform, I just love to hear your thoughts on, like, what make it make sense for me. How is this different than just playing the lottery? Thanks.
Yeah, no, I love it actually. I want to get into it and kind of break this down to something that makes sense on a just a larger level, because you know I don't want to isolate it to just shit coins as the difference, because I look at, again, my goal would in this strategy would be just is Tesla, Nvidia. If you cash out of real estate, however you can create your cash flow to go and buy more Bitcoin. That's everyone has their own preference, right? But if I'm putting $1,000 in Tesla, I'm believing that it's more likely going to produce another $1,000 that I can move into Bitcoin, as opposed to going to zero, and that's it. Now, when you take that approach, in that spreadsheet, you look at how I kind of broke them down. The top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 coins that are there are top market cap coins. They've all been selected for either ETFs or ETF filing. So that means to me that traditional finance, money managers, have found that there's enough demand in the market for them to at least file for an ETF. So they've done the hard work or marketing to decide that they can sell this. That's one way I would look at it. The rest of these,
But Jamie, isn't that more that they're not? I don't know that they're doing the due diligence. I think they're just looking at a way to make a fee,
well,
which is a different thing altogether, right? It could be as much as there's a lot of suckers in Solana. Let's do a Solana ETF. We'll make a fee, and if it goes to zero, well, so be it.
well, I agree with you, but even if there's a lot of suckers that come into Solana, that means that if we buy now and the market comes into later on as price goes up, we're going to be able to sell into the new retail that comes in. I mean, part of this is we're investors trying to increase our investment portfolio. And Robert mentioned about earlier that he recommended that people shouldn't buy right now, take on risk. I would disagree. I think this is the perfect time to take on additional risk as you're going down toward lower price targets. This is the opposite. I would view this point right now, if we were to look back in November of 2021, where if the top is 65,000, we're probably somewhere maybe at 50,000 range. On the flip side, maybe you're 10% different from the low. Who cares? From here, we're going up. I'd rather be buying into this and then watching as it rips up and we're going up through it. As far as
Well, just look at Tesla, and I do have to jump. I apologize. I'll be back in half an hour. But look at Tesla. Like, was there any way for you to know that, say, Doge was going to happen, and that the traditional buyers of Tesla who were singing Elon's praises are now writing swastikas on his cars? You know, that's an unknowable, and that's a risk that you couldn't foresee, in my opinion. And that's not the kind of risk you're taking with Bitcoin with a 45%, over any 4-year period CAGR. So I'll just leave it at that. Loren, I'll turn it over to you. I got to run. And Jamie, thanks for coming up and being a sport. And
thank you, Coach.
I'll
Appreciate you,
check
man.
back in a half hour.
Hey,
Hola,
Lauren, Lauren,
amigas and
Lauren,
amigas. Yes,
Lauren,
please
just
chime in.
like with all
Sure,
due
buddy. Yeah, please come on
yeah,
in here.
with all due respect to
Water's
Jamie,
fine. Yeah.
right?
Please,
Like this is such a classic example of what we call mistaking brains for a bull market, right? Like he saw somebody turn a bunch of money into a fortune during, this great little bull run that these alts had, and therefore assumes that that will continue, right? And that's just not how the world works, right? Like those kind of moves in micro caps and crap shit, right? Like those are really rare. They're kind of like bubbles, right? And just seeing it happen once doesn't mean it's going to happen again, right? Like underlying positive investment thesis, you have to have a real reason. Like, why is XRP going higher? Why do you believe in Solana? Why? Right? Like, what is the moat that Solana has over the next chain that comes up that's faster, quicker, right? Cheaper? Like, in the end, those theses don't exist. Whereas with Bitcoin, we all know what our thesis is. Like, it is pretty clearly defined. So, I would just caution anybody who's listening to this who thinks that there's an easy way, that there's easy money on the table. That's just not the way the world works, right? Making money's hard, and it takes consistency. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline, right? And you're not going to see that trading crap, right? That doesn't mean that every once in a while you won't find people that make money on fucking crap, but that's not a business model, right? That
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it's
Well said.
casino gambling, but it's worse, right? Because at least in the casino, you know what your odds are, right? Here you
Yeah.
don't, and ultimately, with all of these shit coins, somebody's got a metric shit ton of them and is looking to dump them. And then just to address the ETF thing, like that's not a thesis. A thesis that Wall Street's come up with a way to dump their supply onto retail, right? Like that's a negative thesis. It doesn't show that there's institutional demand. It shows that somebody on Wall Street's got a shit ton of something and is looking to get out of it.
Hey, Dark, just one final point on this. I'll keep it quick. It's everything you said, and there's, I mean, most people on this call know there's a difference between trading and investing, right? So, like everything you said is spot on about having a thesis to invest, and then on top of that, you wanna add market timing risk, where not only you got the thesis right, but you've also figured out the actual timing of when you want to get in and when you want to get out. I mean, it plenty of people have tried to do it and not been able to do it, and these are guys who do it professionally, 60 hours a week, right? So yeah, I'm with you, Dark, 100%. I think if the end goal is to make more fiat to buy more bitcoins, there are more prudent ways to do that than trading shitcoins part time.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and iron out the rest of the hands and whatnot in the room, and then we'll hopefully shift topics. I believe it was
Gen,
Jen.
yeah, let's
Jen
go
was
to
next,
Gen
right?
X, Loren.
Terrence,
Yeah.
thank
Yep.
you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good to
Good
hear you
morning,
all.
sir.
I appreciate the cordial discussion. I got to go, but I just wanted to remind everybody that you've got a 5.7 something % difficulty about to kick in tomorrow. And if there's any certainty that I have, it's that every 2016 blocks that will happen, regardless of what anybody does. Have a good day.
Best advice of the day, right there, ladies and gentlemen. Who are we? Who are we at, Terrence?
It looked like we had BC1, and then
What's up,
Hey,
guys? Good
good
afternoon.
afternoon. Good to have you. Mike is yours.
The, thank you very much. I think Jamie is missing the boat completely, right? Like he's only talking about making more dollars to buy Bitcoin, but the true underlying statement that he needs to say is like he wants more sats, right? And if you put $1,000 in Solana today and you make $1,000 more on Solana, doesn't mean you get more sats because Bitcoin moves at the same time and probably faster than Solana. So you need to look at like how do you create more sats? That is the thing that is important. It's unconfiscatable, permissionless, and like you hold it yourself. Nobody can fucking get it from you. That's the true value of Bitcoin. You can send it whenever you want. Nobody can stop you from doing it. Whereas like all the other coins go down, Bitcoin never goes down. You don't want more dollars. You want more sats. That's my 2 sats. More you're not gonna get.
Well said. Sounds like somebody's Anon account to me, because man, that voice sounds familiar. And Terrence, I think what we had Thomas and
I think we should go back to Jamie, and then
Jamie's.
Thomas.
Sorry, yeah, I lost all
Yeah, to
hands.
be
I
fair.
minimized, so yeah,
Yep.
sounds good.
Yeah, I appreciate it. No, I just wanted to respond to a couple of things like Dark was bringing up. Like, for context, these are small bets in broadly placed, um, other technology companies. I would also ask, do you view Tesla, Nvidia, and Apple or Facebook, these other technology internet network companies, the same as these in crypto? Because if it's Bitcoin dominance is roughly between 40 and 65%. Let's just say 70-30. There's been consistently 30% of value in non-Bitcoin, uh, as far as the total market. And all I have to just try to do is how can I extract that 30% and roll it into there? It'd be the same thing if I looked at Tesla in the same way.
I
How do
think
you?
that
But if you
the
don't
key
get more
word here is
sats,
value too. One is actually adding value to humanity, and it is arguable that there's much value in the others. And like Puncher said, we're not up here to crucify you or anything. And
No,
I
I love the pushback. Honestly,
perfect, good.
I, I um I, I look for ways for it to I get a thesis, I believe in it, you're convicted in it, right? But then we have to challenge our own thesis to see if it holds up. So I'm totally open to being wrong. I just you know I've seen as far as let me respond to one thing as far as the correlated nature. I've found that they're very independently correlated, and rather than chasing them, parking some small amounts of money in many of them, And then as they increase, rebalancing them constantly into Bitcoin, it's been a very profitable or Bitcoin gaining strategy, and also less stressful. I don't have to be anywhere. I'm already there waiting for it to potentially move. In these narratives, market caps, all the things that have happened that are going to, that have been talked about this over this cycle that are different from last cycle. And part of the reason why I pinned that portfolio is so we can track it in real time. I'd love to come back and see this actually was effective or it was not effective, and maybe continuing the discussion. I don't. My goal is not to
But
move anyone
that
off
that
of Bitcoin. My goal is because there's different strategies to Bitcoin. For example, Grant Cardone takes he recently just put he's a real estate guy. But now he's packaged Bitcoin to real estate. He takes the cash flow from the real estate to buy more Bitcoin. That's his strategy to increase the amount of Bitcoin that he can get, as opposed to him just buying the Bitcoin directly. So I look at that as a vehicle to get Bitcoin. I look at traditional finance as vehicles to get Bitcoin. I look at the 30% value inside of crypto as another vehicle to get more Bitcoin. And it if I can rebalance into it constantly, I reduce my risk that I've wasted that money. And then when Bitcoin does do its 4x this cycle, instead of having 10,000 in there, because I've rebalanced effectively from all of these other areas, maybe Bitcoin's at $50,000 by the time it does its 4x, and I have 200, I have three quarters of a whole Bitcoin, as opposed to, you know, 20% of a Bitcoin, because I didn't rebalance into it. That's my
but then
thesis.
that's a question of timing on your
Hey,
side,
BC,
right? Like
BC
you need
one,
to
I,
you need to
BC
get,
one. I hate to
was
cut
gonna
you
say,
off,
are
but
we not doing hands anymore, or?
yeah, we're gonna go to hands. So we're gonna actually even transition out. So we're gonna go two more hands on this one, and then we'll switch it up. I've been getting requests through DMs and whatnot, just to once again, no offense, anybody. It's just we can only spend so much time. I am a freedom maximalist, so I definitely support people's freedom to do things. But I am highly convicted, and actually, I think it speaks to my own integrity when it comes to these things, because I can't look at myself in the mirror and be okay with it at this point. I used to do this too, so I don't judge. So it's fine. I think we're at Thomas, and then we'll end with macro, and then hopefully we will talk about new things. Thomas.
Yeah, so I don't really have anything to say about altcoins. I did it. I don't do it. If people want to do it, if people want to say 1+1=5, have fun. I wanted to go back. I had to drop off earlier because you guys were talking about the macro stuff of what's going on with the tariffs, which I find pretty interesting. I actually got a call while I was
Hey
doing
Thomas, can we skip down to macro and then come back, and
yeah,
then that
yeah,
maybe we can phase back to that topic, because I think
yeah,
macro
okay.
wanted to speak directly. Macro, you wanted to talk directly to the last subject, correct? Yeah, come on in.
Yeah, no, I did. I just the only question I was gonna ask, and we don't have to spend much time on this, is you can absolutely trade altcoins and make a quote Bitcoin return if you have correct timing. But the benchmark you really need to be looking at is, had you just been allocating the entire time straight into Bitcoin, would you have ended up with more Bitcoin? Because your hurdle rate is not actually the dollar return, the hurdle rate is the Bitcoin return. And if Bitcoin already has a CAGR of, I don't know, let's just call it 40%, then, if you're under 40% and you're sitting there going, oh yeah, I did great, I killed it, I made 32% returns in fiat. Well, you just lost it 8% in Bitcoin terms. And I just think a lot of people don't actually measure using Bitcoin as their denominator. So I would just
Yeah,
encourage anybody to make sure that they're using Bitcoin as the denominator, and they
for
need to
sure.
be tracking, even if you're playing in stocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you have had more Bitcoin if you had just bought it with your dollars at that time, versus especially after you have to pay taxes and everything? So anyways, I just wanted to make that point, and we don't need to beat a dead horse anymore.
Yeah, no, I think I am totally with you on that one, macro, and I think you're basically saying the same thing as BC1 was stating earlier. And Salty and Mega, I hope you
Yes.
guys didn't want to talk about this subject, because, like I think macro said, we've kind of beat that one a lot. So we'll switch
Yeah,
back. We'll flip it back to Thomas. We'll keep your hands up if you want to talk about new topics, but Thomas wanted it. Sounds like you wanted to switch back to tariffs and whatnot. Thomas.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I'm looking at the market. It just seems. And I was texting you, Lauren, on the side. I got a call from a CPG client, and they're freaking out a little bit because they got a complex global supply chain. And it was what I took away from the call was that, we spend a lot of time on these calls talking about this, that, and the other thing in great detail, and are very familiar with all the nuances. And even with what Trump's doing, we don't really have a strong idea because he's been somewhat opaque on the grand plan. I'll call it normies, people in business who are just running their businesses. I don't want to say it caught them people by surprise, but they don't know how to make heads or tails of it, and they're reacting to, oh my God, tariffs just got to put in place, and the stock market's down, and what are we going to do? And they're having emergency meetings, and they're putting things on hold. It's an interesting observation that we take for granted how much time and familiarity we spend uh, on these topics. I do think, when I look at VIX at 40, the Nasdaq down 5%, the 10-year dropping below 4. It's very, very interesting disconnect of what's happening. Bitcoin's actually holding up very well around the 83,000 mark, and gold is. I'm looking at the gold on my screen. It's fucking down $83. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that drop that big. I'm sure it's happened, but that's a huge drop. And so you're like, how is what the hell is going on here?
Is that a 1 day drop?
Yeah, gold's down $83 right now.
Holy shit. Somebody better go check on Peter Schiff.
Silver's down $2. Again, that's 6.6% drop. Oil's down 7.25%. I think Trump's playing. Look, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I think he's playing a dangerous game. If he doesn't clue people in on what his grand plans are, because everyone's confused in the capital markets.
So you don't
Gary,
think it's not 40 chess anymore, huh, Thomas?
I allow for that possibility, and I hope that that's the case. But I'll tell you, in the midst of this chaos, it's not fun. And if you have a substantial amount of money involved in this, you can't be happy or concerned. People are losing a lot of money, and they don't know what to make of it. So you see a retreat, and it looks like the only thing people are retreating to are the treasuries, and to a much lesser extent, Bitcoin. It doesn't feel like there's a Bitcoin liquidation going on in the same way there is on other investments.
And Thomas, real quick, can we just compare that to what happened in 2020 when there was this level of uncertainty in the market and Bitcoin nuked?
Yeah, well, one
It's
difference.
so different, right?
But one point that I think you got to make is that just watching the sell off, it's very orderly, right? Like what we're not seeing, the S&P trading in, down, literally 100-point swings. It's just going straight down and it's going orderly. It doesn't appear that there's panic, right? You don't see people hitting bids, under the market. It's just a slow grind, orderly sell off. And until there's panic and blood in the streets, right? Until you see the Dow dropping 500 points at a tick, like you did back in 2020, you're not going to find a bottom, right? Like this thing's ugly. This is about as ugly as I've ever seen as far as a sell off is concerned, just simply because it's completely orderly.
Interesting. Yeah. Hey, let's go back to hands again. I know a lot of people want to speak. It might get spicy because I saw Joe down there who's a listener currently, but he was the equivalent of laughing his head off in emoji talk here. Infra, aka Robert.
Yeah, I was going to point out copper's down like almost 9%. Cocoa's down, coffee's down, pretty much everything's down. And I wanted to point out the yields, right? Like Thomas was talking about the U.S. Treasury yields, I want to point out a couple others. So the Canadian 10-year down 11 basis points, the Australian 10-year down 10 basis points, German 10-year down 8, British down 11, Chinese down 6, the Swiss 10-year is down 2 to basically nothing. The Swiss 10-year yield is 50 basis points. Japan down 17 basis points, their 10-year. Malaysia down 9. Yeah. Indonesia down 12. So like this is like not just a US story. Of course, we're in the US and it affects us directly, but like this is a global story when it comes to rates and growth and kind of the expectations for what this is going to do to economic activity kind of writ large, which I think is an important thing to point out.
Now, I think Joe. I hope Joe pops up on stage because I'd like to hear what he had to say. But I know I see some of his posts and messaging. He says that Trump will capitulate if the S&P drops. Well, say below 5,000, and we're damn close to that. We're at 51.34 on the S&P. I don't know. I mean, like I just don't. What's frustrating is that we don't know what the game is here and what they're trying to do. And if they've got master of the universe 4D chess plan, great. I hope it works out. In the meantime, people are scared and frustrated, and they're moving capital. They're going to move it to these treasuries as the one safe haven. Say, hey, I just want to park my capital somewhere. I'll tell you, in the business sector, firms like that are in that have a heavy supply chain exposure to a global supply chain, the tariffs really muck with their business model. You can argue about whether or not they should have that global thing, but they've optimized their global supply chain based on an order of things, and the order of things has been changed with the algebra here. And again, it might be advisable for us to say, hey, we don't want to have one-sided tariffs. I get all that, but the disruption in the way it's being done has a big impact. And what I see it in the business sector is it paralyzes decisions. So projects are on hold, or people are stepping back and having crisis meetings to determine what does this mean for us. And the conversation I had with this company just an hour ago was, I said, we're 48 hours into this or less than that. Some of it hasn't even taken effect here. You have to step back and be a little sober because some of this might just roll back to where it was, and this is positioning. You have to see exactly what's going to happen. So you mentioned, like, as an example, cocoa. It doesn't make any sense to have tariffs on cocoa because it's not a U.S. thing. I think that the things that's going to have tariffs that are going to stick are ones that promote U.S. investment and U.S. job creation. I don't think putting a tariff on raw materials like cocoa and other things that don't have a domestic market, but we need those things in our supply chains. So it's very complicated. I would say it's very frustrating not knowing what's happening. I want to be supportive of the president and the administration, but it's hard to do that without knowing what they're doing.
I would point out California governor set to announce a plan to request countries imposing tariffs on the U.S. exempt products made in California. This initiative aims to establish strategic relationships with these countries. The announcement is scheduled for Friday afternoon, indicating an upcoming action. And he's basically saying, we make up 14% of US GDP. We're the 5th largest economy. We're not scared to use our market power to fight back against the tariffs. So I thought that was interesting.
California thinks it's a nation.
Indeed. Terence, I'm glad you're there, buddy. I didn't know if Mega.
I've been here. I just brought Joe up, and
Okay, cool.
Surfer Boy still has his hand up. It's been up for a long time.
I would like to introduce him properly as our token model and professional surfer on the panel, Luke. Sir, the mic is yours.
What's up, friends?
What's going on, buddy?
Man, kind of feels like COVID vibes a little bit with the craziness.
Right?
But I had a question for infra. Yeah, so obviously, yes, the manufacturing has been stripped away from America over the years, and they want to reshore jobs and all this type of stuff. But if they're willing to negotiate tariffs, doesn't that mitigate their plan of reshoring? Because isn't it either you keep high tariffs for revenue and trying to reshore jobs, or these are just to negotiate them down? Like,
Yeah,
how do you square that circle? I mean,
I don't know.
And
Yeah,
and 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 as an additional question, how does the TikTok deal factor into this info, which has been
I
mentioned 5 times by the White House? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, that's true. I noted that they've been mentioning it a lot. I just can't see. I don't see I can't see through the noise, the signal through the noise on that one. But I would say that, like, when it comes to whether or not this is a negotiating tactic, are they really trying to reshore it? Like, the thing is, in order to adequately reshore, and make our goods competitive, they need a weaker dollar. So, like, I've always said that tariffs alone we're never going to suddenly make America an industrial powerhouse. Like, you need a kind of unwind of the dollar carry trade, and the overvaluation of the dollar. Otherwise, yeah, we can build factories here, but our stuff that we make here, because of the currency, it just won't be cost effective for foreigners to buy. So I think that piece is important, and I do think that something is coming, in that direction. Like I've, been mentioning the Mar-a-Lago Accord, something like that. I do think that that will be coming soon, like relatively soon. But yeah, no, how long are they willing to impose them? How much balls do they really have? I don't know. The only thing I would say, though, is that the willingness that they showed, with how hawkish. I mean, it was even more hawkish than my expectations. So, and I think it was more hawkish than Wall Street's worst case scenario, right? Like, most of the people I hear on CNBC and Bloomberg are going, yeah, like, this is even worse than our worst case, situation. So yeah, that kind of indicates that they're pretty serious about it, maybe more serious than even I was giving them credit for. But whether or not, it's a negotiating tactic, like, look, if it ends up being the kind of thing, right, where it's just a negotiating tactic, get them to remove their tariffs on us, we remove our tariff on them. To Luke's point, unless the dollar is weaker, that didn't do anything. That didn't reindustrialize. So there's like a couple pieces here, and of course a lot of, like, game theory and political stuff that it's not my area, but yeah, no, there are certainly, it was never going to be quick, simple, easy, cheap. Yeah, like, they're doing something of this magnitude, really reordering not just the American economy, but the global economy, and the global monetary order. Given that we are the piggy bank for the world, and that is, with the dollar. Yeah, I don't know. They need a weaker dollar, and today the dollar's up almost 1%. It was down sharply yesterday, but I'm watching the dollar because, yeah, if they get a weaker dollar, then of course, it makes more sense to actually reindustrialize and actually, take that seriously and go for it. But if the dollar doesn't weaken substantially, there's kind of no point, in my opinion.
well, and that's the thing too, is like they have this window before the midterms. Like, if this gets too crazy and countries really start retaliating towards the United States, and people just freeze up and don't want to spend money into like a slowing economy, and businesses can't figure it out, then the midterms are a wash, and they're not going to be able to get anything done. And it's just, yeah, I mean, I don't I,
Well, and even taking the midterms out, this is a 5-10 year thing,
yeah,
right?
so I mean, then if this is a wash within the next couple of years, then people are going to vote Democrats in.
well, it's worse than that, right? Like, not only,
You'll get AOC in there.
well, I mean, I think, and Joe would point this out, right, that if you lose the support of Congress, they can overturn these tariffs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. Yeah,
No, that's
that's what I
right.
thought. So I mean, like, this is kind of a big gamble, and you get the sense that the rest of the world, at least the major players of the world, let's say Europe, China, Japan, they know that Trump can't pull this off if they choose to fight him. Like, they know they could almost torpedo our political process with like a hard fuck you, and I fear that's where we're headed. Right? It just feels really tenuous.
Hey,
Well, they
Dark.
kind of already did. China.
Yeah. Well,
They
Hey,
kind of already.
again, right? We're a couple days in, so it's early, but like, if you just game theory it out, if you were sitting over in these countries and you're thinking to yourself, well, we can back down, but our way of lives get destroyed, or we can fight, and we probably politically can sway the United States. It would seem to play the long game, the political game would be the way you preserve your position.
Are we surprised to see how well Bitcoin is faring through this market craziness right now?
Astonished but not surprised. I think it's mega strong. BTC over NQ is like showing mega strength. I'm not really surprised. I mean, it's had this really tight correlation I've talked about a long time, but the fact that it is showing so much strength relative to the Nasdaq, which has been the main correlation, that is like mega bullish for Bitcoin, in my opinion.
hey, Infra. Oh, sorry. Let me just one question. Infra, what is there countries? What country has the most leverage to actually negotiate and not completely crush their economy? Like,
Well, so like I was looking at it earlier today, and like for example, Mexico, their as a share of their economy, exports from Mexico to the U.S. as a share of their GDP, it's like 25 to 30%. For us, imports from Mexico as a share of our GDP is like 1.5. And it's the same story for Canada. I think not nearly as pronounced, but still significant. And then China is about 1.5% as a share of our GDP, the imports, and for them, I think about 3%. So the consumer, like the purchasing power and the consumption, the American market, and the consumers in the American market are there is quite a bit of leverage, in my opinion, just looking at the math. Um, Politically, it's a kind of a different story, because it's not just as simple as, well, our GDP is 2x or 3x, right? Your imports only make up this of our like it, something like this is not going to play out in a super simple black and white. It's going to have much more complicated mechanisms at play, like the domestic politics of each country. But yeah, no, I haven't really found a country where they have that those numbers. At least in our major trading partners, I haven't found a country that has where we're kind of in a weaker position. All the ones that I've looked at, we have differing levels of leverage, but with all of them, a significant amount of leverage.
the thing that's weird too is like you would like to think that someone like Besson or someone's genius behind the scenes, like they have this plan, but then you look at how they calculated the tariffs, and it seems like a complete like it just seems random. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
and
yeah,
I
but remember, it was also
What does that tell you?
current
What does that tell you?
currency
And now you're
manipulation.
getting closer to the answer.
what is
Hey,
that?
hey guys.
What
That
does that tell
that
you?
there's nobody at the helm that knows what they're doing.
No,
Hey,
no,
Luke. I
no.
mean, what's up, everybody? Happy Friday. I think that I'll just take the other side of that. I think there is a plan. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb here. I think that this whole thing is being perfectly orchestrated, and I think that the tariff announcement, they knew exactly, they knew that this was going to create chaos. They knew that this was going to move the markets down a bit. And looking at Bitcoin, I could not be more bullish about what's happening. I mean, I cannot believe that it's just staying where it is. We're holding over 80. What that tells me is that we have big buyers who are buying in right now. I think all the Eric Trumps and whoever else all down the list is just buying. All the institutions, anybody who's in the know, sort of keeping the price where it's at. And then I don't know if anyone caught this, but Trump flashed the gold card. Did anyone see this? He flashed the gold card and showed it for a few seconds, put it away. He said he's going to be the first buyer himself or whatever. But I'm guessing, this is just a guess, but I'm guessing that they're selling these things like hotcakes right now behind the scenes. And if you think about the broad plan that they've talked about, the gold card to me is the idea that I see that they believe will be the biggest sort of the biggest win for them, the way for them to bring in the most revenue. And I'm expecting them to make a big announcement that they've sold a shit ton of these gold cards. And I mean, you only have to sell 100,000 for them to get a trillion. 100,000 gold cards is $1 trillion in revenue. So I believe they're going to start making these announcements. Bitcoin's gonna go, and then at that point they start looking like a really smart administration. And to me, that the tariffs is more of just a bargaining chip. I think they're just using it as leverage. I think Trump will capitulate, Joe. I think he's going to start sort of backtracking some of it, but he's waiting to let people buy in, get the news about the gold card out, and go from there. But that's just my take. I don't know. It's pure speculation, but Trump's been sort of hinting at the gold card, and so has Howard Lutnick, saying positive things like we're selling these things. And I'm getting the sense that they're already doing that behind the scenes.
Hey Joe, what do the tariff calculations tell you?
Okay, so I'm piecing together, sort of a deep dive that I've done. So this is how I've tried to reconcile it in my mind. So bear with me for a second. Okay. Why do you put in place indiscriminately tariffs across the board against countries based on their deficit in terms of trade deficit with the United States? Why do you do that? Why do you put it across even countries that don't even have really reciprocal quote unquote tariffs? You go down the list, there's some countries that have subsidized certain industries, but they're not like tariffs in the purest sense. Why do you do this in a big statement? Why do you roll it out in a big, heavily televised and heavily forecast demonstration? And then basically say it's not going to go into effect until the 9th, and then immediately announce what was reported by Charlie Gasparino and others as being a deal that was cut 2 weeks ago with Vietnam within 24 hours. This entire thing is a stunt. It is 100% a stunt to reinvigorate discussions across the board with all allies and enemies of the United States in terms of a trade deal, and to shock people into submission. It is straight out of the art of the deal. You can go back and read some of this, but this is all a giant stunt delayed by a week. It is all about negotiation. This is why he had his emissaries go out there 4 different times yesterday and say, no, there's no negotiation. When you say there's no negotiation, it's supposed to be implying to the other side that you are going to take a hardline stance. But as soon as the market was down 4%, he came out himself, the commander in chief, and said, no, no, actually, everything's up for negotiation. We'll always take a good deal. This is designed to confuse. It's designed to see who will bend the knee, to see who is afraid, and to gain leverage. And I don't think the vast majority of these things are ever going to affect in the night. I think this is all just a big stunt. And to make a stunt work, right? If you are a showman, if you're, P.T. Barnum, you have to make the audience believe it. You have to make the audience actually think you might go through and press the red button that destroys the economy, which because it will, right? I mean, we know objectively, and JP Morgan's talking about, it's going to cause anywhere between a 2 to 2.5% increase in PCE across the board. And I think this is why Powell said again that he's like, well, we don't even really know how these things are going to take effect. He knows damn well that tariffs across the board from 30 to 40% in some of these countries is going to capsize demand. You're going to be paying $700 for a pair of Nikes. That's what the current tariffs that are in place are going to imply. So, to me, I think it's all just a big dog and pony show. I don't think it's real. I could be wrong on this, but I think the market is telling you that it believes Trump. right? It believes Trump. Now, here's the bullish case. The bullish case is that if I'm correct, a lot of these markets are going to rip. And this is an unbelievable buying opportunity across the board for a lot of assets. But anyway, I'll just shut up.
Joe, I totally agree with you. And if you know Trump and if you read his book, which at the time I read it, I thought was kind of stupid, and but that way that guy rolls. I mean, yesterday I talked about the people who are awake who kind of know there's a problem, but most people are asleep and don't really know there's a problem. They just live their days. So it's, the desired effect here is to shake people into talking about, understanding, feeling the pain of a system that's, you know, I don't want to say collapsing, but a system that needs attention. And now that he's got everybody's attention, which he clearly does, um, you know, they look for the solution, or they look for the ameliorating statements and the renegotiations and all that, which I agree might make the market rip. But there is an underlying problem that needs to be addressed, in my opinion. So I guess this is phase one of shock and awe, get everybody's attention. Now you've got the bully pulpit and everybody's paying attention, and now you implement whatever the plan is. And I've heard what the plan might be, and I don't claim to know exactly, but I'm sure there is one. And
The
phase
plan
one
is
is
this.
over.
The plan is this. You want to know the plan? The plan is to get the best possible deal. That's the plan. Get the best possible deal and to blink before you hit the wall. That is the plan. Blink before you get the wall, get the best possible deal. This is why, he's done this 2 times already with the Mexico Canada trade agreements, right? He went like within 12 hours of having them being implemented, then he backed out. This is blink before you get the wall. This is all a stunt. This is not about really bringing back manufacturing jobs, which he knows are going to take years to get set up in the Midwest. Again, how do I get the best deal?
So, Joe, what happens if the other countries don't blink? Like, what happens if you get called?
He will. I think he will.
Oh,
He will. He's shown this pension in the past. He'll go right up against the wire, right to the wire. And
his
he knows
credibility,
what
his
I mean.
credibility, his credibility will be sure. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying his credibility would just be
No,
shitty.
no, because even if you're a good showman, you know this. Even in defeat, you can declare victory, and he does that all the time. Even in defeat, he declares victory. Did anybody remember when Mexico paid for the wall? Actually, he
Yeah,
lost the election and he declared victory. So I mean, come on.
yeah, no, I agree, Joe. But look, it's a valid technique. Say what you will. The guy's a billionaire and he's a super successful guy, and it's a valid technique. It's not my technique, but maybe we'll have to wait and see. I'm really curious though. There are real issues that need to be addressed, and I agree. Like at a high level, he's trying to get the best deal. But we do have, we got to refund a whole metric shit ton of debt. The rates are too high on that debt. It's not sustainable. We
No, they're
have to
not.
kick the duration.
Not anymore.
What do you mean not
No,
anymore?
not anymore. You got a 10.
We
First of
shaved
all,
100 basis
if you look
points off.
100%, yeah, that's massive. Like 100 basis point is a massive. You know how much interest that is over the span of 10 years? It's like $1.5 trillion worth of interest already done,
And I think they
locked
want to
in.
get it
Trillion
lower.
dollars.
I think it needs to be
Well,
lower, or
I
it
mean, you
continues
always
to be a
want to get
problem.
it.
Yeah.
Tell me when it's too low. I mean, or tell me
I
when
don't
it's
know.
too
Bit
high. Like,
bonds, 1% bit bonds. That's what I think's coming. I know you could call me
bit
crazy.
bonds aren't going to they're not getting through Congress, man. It's not going to happen. Come on, it's never going to happen.
Joe.
Okay.
Maybe not.
We said the same about it's the reserve, and
Yeah,
there's
is the
theories out
reserve through
there that we're
Congress? By the
selling
way,
gold to buy Bitcoin.
did,
It's revenue neutral.
I know nobody's talking about that deal. How that basically Lummis and others around her are saying it's not coming up for a vote before the midterms, right? You guys, you catch that news item? We're not getting a SBR passed through Congress before the midterms.
But it's
Which
still a
by then,
functioning EO. It's still a functioning EO.
the EO doesn't result in any new capital coming into the market. Zero.
What if they're selling gold, which is down heavy today, and Bitcoin's staying? What if they're selling gold into the market after re-onshoring it to buy Bitcoin? That's revenue neutral. I mean, I'm not saying that's
How are
happening, but
they selling? Who is selling the gold? You through the Economic Stabilization Act? Who's selling the gold? Where are we getting this?
I don't know. I'm saying there are revenue neutral ways that they can enact to try to get some Bitcoin into the treasury. No, or into the stockpile.
Yeah,
It's
Joe.
they
it's
no,
if
actually,
they did do it,
hang,
it's
hang,
legally they
hang,
can do
hang,
it.
hang, hang, hang on. Okay, let's just read the EO. Okay, let's go back. This is not Joe's opinion.
It's
The
my space.
EO tasks the EO tasked the administration with studying the use of budget for revenue. Budget require okay. To study in 120 days. Oh, actually, just keep guys. We're gonna go.
I can't hear Joe.
Yeah, he's
Can you
breaking
guys hear?
up. He's breaking up.
He's being redacted at the moment.
You're in the matrix, Joe.
All right. All I'm saying is there's a crisis. Everybody agrees there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, everything's on the table. So while the Democrats may not vote for it now, if Trump can not blink for a while, they might go for everything because then you can shift the blame on them. Say, look, we had a plan and they voted against it. And there's all kind. We're in the first pitch of the first inning here, Joe.
Hunter, would you agree that there's a crisis and certainly a crisis emerging here, but would you agree that the nemesis of a Trump and a Trump agenda would likely say, let's exacerbate this crisis to damage him, because that damaging him is
Am I
more
back?
important than the country?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah,
Can anyone hear me?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, I
Joe.
hear you,
Hang on
Joe.
one sec. Yeah, I agree with that, Thomas. I mean, look, he's not running for reelection despite his claims that he might run for a third term, which is just designed, in my opinion, to rile up the haters.
Well,
But
they talked about JD Vance running and him being JD's vice president. That's the workaround that I heard.
whatever. Yeah, whatever. I don't know that would fly, but whatever. I believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. So I would just say that if they're prepared to take this thing to a crisis level and then offer a solution, I mean, that's the classic communist tactic. I created a crisis and then I come in as the big hero offering a solution, and people are throwing themselves at the solution because they're desperate. I don't know what the plan is. I honestly don't. I know he's got some smart people, and I heard on the space earlier today, they're all retards, they're all stupid. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. I doubt that that's the case, but
Well, in terms of one of those
no
smart
inside
people,
knowledge.
do you believe the Besant reporting that says that he's trying to get Trump to stand down on the tariffs? I sent that to Thomas earlier. Did you see that?
I did see that. I mean,
I believe
it
none of what I hear and only half of what I see.
that's from Gasparino. So I accept that it could be true. It'd be hard for me to think like, as I think of Trump's inner circle, and I could be wrong, but it seems like it's Lutnick, Besant, those two are probably in his inner circle. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like if that got out and looked like Trump Besant was not on the team, that doesn't bode well for Trump's ability to hold things together. But again, it could be
Why?
a
He
illusion.
loves that. He loves that crap,
Yeah.
Thomas. He loves arguments internally and people, complaining, and he actually compliments that. It's like the team of rivals, Lincoln type stuff.
Yeah, Joe. My concern is that they're playing a high stakes game here, and if they have a plan, great. I hope it's successful.
No gamble, no future is a phrase in poker. No gamble, no
Uh,
future. If you don't play high stakes poker, you're not going to have a big win. I mean, that's just the reality.
yeah. So
I mean, I don't understand why this is. Well, you voted for this. You wanted this. You wanted somebody to shake things up,
I
right?
do.
You didn't want like incrementalism and let's just keep the status quo. This is what you
I don't
wanted.
want incrementalism. I want it to be. I want a little bit more clarity, without divulging the detailed blueprints, but a little bit more clarity about where this is going. To be honest
Hey,
with you,
hey,
Yeah,
Joe.
but
But
I don't.
clarity weakens you. Clarity weakens
That's
you.
right,
It
Joe. That's
weakens
right.
your bargaining. Listen, I'll defer to the people in the armed services on the stage because you know this better than I. Do you tell the enemy this is where we're going and we're going to be here at 7 o'clock? Be ready. I mean, no, come
I'll tell
on.
you what we do, and we do it well. We know that our plan, we red team our plan, and then we know that our plan doesn't survive first contact with the enemy. So we're very flexible and we're constantly reevaluating the plan based on in the field situation. And I find it hard to believe that in day 2 of the implementation of the plan, the Treasury Secretary is already off the reservation, unless that's what they wanted us to think.
People get cold feet. Markets guys get cold feet. You want to know people that don't play poker well? Mostly it's markets guys. I
Yeah,
mean, they just
totally,
don't understand.
totally.
They get scared when they see red. Okay, invest in some market guy. You get scared. I mean, I really think he's nervous now.
Well, but they
I believe
talked
it.
about this. I mean, they had to know this was going to happen, right? Like
I don't
all
think
of a
they
sudden he goes,
expected a
"Oh
ten
shit,
percent
we're down 10% instead of
you
5. I'm
listen,
out."
listen. You want to talk about liquidity? You know, Bitcoiners always talk about liquidity, oh, liquidity in marketplaces and M2 and all this thing. You're going to wipe out in the last 3 days of trading somewhere between $5 to $7 trillion worth of liquidity from the market. $5 to $7 trillion. And you want to talk about liquidity? That's liquidity. That's marginable debt. That's people that can live on that. There's people that are drawing in their retirement accounts that have to now say sell at lower values. That's a massive hit to the American economy in 3 days. It's not just like my friend Gary said, is, oh, it's just an abstraction. It doesn't affect me. It affects tens of millions of Americans who now see their 401ks down 10%. That's a massive hit. You know, if you're a guy
Well,
that squirreled away
they've seen it
if you
before.
squirreled away $2 million, if you squirreled away $2 million in a 401k, you just lost
Yeah, but
$200,000
the
in the last
average the
couple of days.
average 401k is 52k, 52,000. But yes,
I know, but
And
those
you're
aren't,
getting a
we don't,
big
who
tax
cares
break.
about the
And you're going to
average?
get a
Well,
big tax break.
Who
if I may at
who
the
cares about the
well,
average? That's not where consumption. It's at the top
of
1%.
course, I care about the average American. I understand that from an economic
Oh,
point of view, but I'm just pointing out that,
Hold on.
like, yeah,
Hold
the
on.
rich are getting hurt, but
We're missing the big point. We're missing the big point though. We keep hearing that, oh yes, half of Americans don't own assets. But the half of Americans that do, that own equity in these different companies, that own small business and private businesses, they employ the percentage of Americans that don't own the stock market. So I'm sorry, but like if the S&P 500, Nasdaq, Russell, etc., if they take it on the chin with another 10%, 15%, some of them 20%, people get fired. People get laid off.
No,
And so
Matt,
the
Matt, Matt.
Matt,
I'm one of those guys. I do
Matt, can
not
I
base
answer your
my
yes,
I
question?
do
please,
not
Joe.
base my
Yeah,
Yeah.
small business.
Like that
Wait,
that's
time
the
out.
other shoe
Matt,
that
I do
that's the
not
other
base
shoe
my
that
small
drops.
business on.
That's maybe
I
that's you,
I
but
want to tie this together.
Go,
okay.
go ahead. Go.
But
Okay, I want
it's
to.
all wrapped together though. Fewer people buying products, fewer people paying for your services, fewer customers that are trading with you via international markets. This isn't siloed to like, oh, only the 401k people are upset. Like
No, you're right.
it's broader.
So Matt,
It's
just walk us through this. Walk us through this, okay? Because I feel like sometimes in these rooms with the Bitcoin centric discussions, we don't talk about equities enough. People hate equities in the Bitcoin market. I get it, but you don't. I know from your positioning. I want you to walk us through what happens. Okay, what happens when earnings across companies decline? What actually happens practically to both the stock price and to the company?
the company refuses to lose money. They'll protect their margins. They'll hiring freezes have already happened. Next comes the layoffs.
Next,
Next comes the okay,
Operating
bottom
correct.
income.
10%, 20%, 30% of our staff. I'm sorry, you're let go immediately.
Okay, and then just walk us through a little bit more as they start to lay off and unemployment creeps closer to 5 than 4%. Then what happens with the aggregate demand in the U.S. economy?
Falls off a cliff. Falls off a cliff. Now
And then what happens to the companies? What do they do then?
lay off more. Like they'll start shuttering factories. They'll start shuttering stores. They'll lay off more. They'll cut to the bone. And now we are just debating: is this a dot-com bubble or is this a 2008? That or
Well,
2022?
And
Excuse me. It could be a
this
2022.
is
But
but the reason I want to emphasize this is that stock prices aren't just some random abstraction.
bingo.
Okay, they're supposed to reflect estimations for future earnings. That's what you're supposed to be paying from. Now I know there's meme stocks and all this other crap out there that confuses it, but overall, the aggregate demand is driven by earnings. Okay, and one of the reasons the stock market has done really
no, it's
well the
not.
last two
It's not
years is
driven
that
by
the
earnings,
higher
Joe. It's
higher
automatic
it
reinvestment through
absolutely has.
401ks. It's like a robot.
Yeah, but there's no one is automatically reinvesting if you got fired. What are you automatically reinvesting? Instead, you flip to net selling. That's why
Matt,
that's why
I
recessions and
run
bear
those
Exactly.
small
markets are so
businesses
painful.
which account for most of the jobs. Okay. I am that guy. In no case does my 401k, number one, dictate what my business does. My 401k that I have is taking a hit. My IRA, there's no bearing on my. We're
You're
two
still
days into
working.
Yeah,
this.
yeah, you're
You're
still
still
working.
working.
You're not laid off yet.
I'm not laying
And your
anybody off.
employees aren't.
I'm not laying any
All
employees
right,
off.
you're I
Zero.
guess you're the one exception that is
I'm not.
immune from recessions and drawdowns and bear markets. But everyone else,
Matt, let
that
me ask you a
gravity
question. You're
exists.
president. What's your plan? Do you agree we have a problem? Do you agree we
Yes,
have a debt and deficit
you're
problem?
trying to
Okay, well,
thread.
you're president.
Yeah,
Go.
but you're trying to thread the needle. You're trying to thread the needle.
You
Like
don't
I
know their
get
plan. Of course, you don't know their plan. You have no
what
idea. We're
they've
sitting
been
here all
I don't
speculating
think
about
they
what they're
know
doing.
their
yeah,
plan.
yeah, what
I don't think they
Okay,
know their plan.
Besant and
Their
Trump and
their
everybody around
plan.
them and all these smart guys, they don't have a
No,
plan. They're just shooting from the
no,
hip.
their plan. No, 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 no. Their plan is what I told you: is to get the best possible deal
yeah.
they can. That's the plan. That's the when you go into a negotiation, do you say that, oh, this is it? I'm not going to be open to alternatives. I'm going to take this deal or no deal. No, that's not how real businessmen work. They go and they say, I want to get the best
Of
possible
course.
price or the
So
best.
we're 2 days into it, and all I hear is guys squealing like
Whoa,
stuck pigs that their
we're
401ks down.
we're 2 months, we're 3 months into it, really.
Really?
Yeah, since
We're,
inauguration.
so
This isn't.
the market started getting crushed 3 months ago.
Yeah, the all-time high of all markets was back in January and some of them in December. This isn't a week.
Matt, is the market overvalued, or do you think it's
This wasn't
properly
a
valued?
1 week problem. We've been staring at this for over 3 months.
Puncher,
No,
puncher.
we've been
What
staring at this
puncher?
for 40 years,
Yeah,
and no
puncher.
one's done anything about it.
What they're trying to say, and they have a point, is like the reason I wanted to talk about the global bond yields and of course the U.S. Treasury rates, the move in rates is also super important. The reason rates are lower by so much, so sharply, oh, Joe left, but the reason rates are so much lower is because of expectations of lower overall aggregate economic activity, right? Like because to your point, like a lot of capex decisions, right, those are based on the performance of the company's equity. Stock-based compensation, right, like there are even more avenues than what Matt was laying out. But here's where I would maybe diverge or disagree. We are it is clear, I think hopefully we would all agree that the economy is hyper financialized. um, I would just point out and say that as a young person, I would like to see it not be so hyper financialized and not have the well-being of my nation tied to the stock market always going up. And if there is some kind of detox or surgery. I know they've been using the surgery analogy, right? Like some transition away from this hyper financialized, overvalued US dollar based denominated assets due to the reserve currency issue. A transition away from that, I think, is like incredibly good for the American people. Whether or not, like, I think there's kind of two questions, right? And I think Puncher, you're getting out the is it good to restructure the economy, which I agree with you 100%. I think their point is just the mechanics of it. This
Yes.
is gonna cause a significant
But that's
slowdown.
that's what.
Yeah.
But Infra, that's why I always ask, what would you do?
What would I
Nobody
do?
knows the plan,
Okay,
and you can.
you asked me
Yeah,
earlier,
go ahead.
Puncher. I would have
Yeah, Matt.
tried to roll out these tariffs in a smarter way. Like on paper, I absolutely agree that some of these Southeast and Pacific nations, from China to Vietnam to Cambodia to Thailand to etc., some of these countries absolutely deserve tariffs. 100%. You can't you can't allow free trade where um, they have little to no labor laws, little to no safety or health inspections, little to no, in fact, slapping a value added tax on your goods going into the country. But surprise, surprise, there's no tariffs or tax on goods coming out of their country to yours. Like that's a terrible trade agreement. I absolutely agree that Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, et cetera, they deserve tariffs. What I think misses the mark is just everyone gets a flat minimum 10% tariff across the board. And then some of our best allies, like, I don't know, Japan gets a a 25% tariff. Just, I don't know, cause like that's the
But
slapdash.
Matt, first of all, semper fi. Second of all, the thing that I think is lost on a lot of the business guys is that we're in a political environment with very tight time frames and midterms coming.
Yeah, but if
Okay,
you want to make the most,
so
I
so
get
the
that. I
reasoned
get that. You want to
approach,
make
the
the most
reason,
bang for your buck. You want to make the most bang for your buck. Well, we losing industry and manufacturing to let's not beat around the bush. Third world nations is a real problem. uh, losing manufacturer industry to Japan, that's not a problem. That wasn't an issue. That you don't see, Google, Apple, etc. They're building new iPhones and MacBooks and new products in Japan. They don't. That's we're not losing our manufacturing power to Japan.
I know, but Matt, you're in
No,
the
I'm
weeds a
not.
little
This
bit.
no,
Look,
no.
we're
The whole
talking
point,
about Donald
yeah, the
Trump.
whole
Yeah,
point is you could have
your
made
your technique takes too
no,
long.
no, you could have
It
announced no,
takes
you could have announced the exact same sort of rollout yesterday on here's all the countries that we actually have a terrible trading relationship with and leave off your strongest trading partners and your allies. You could have easily done that yesterday. But this whole like everyone
okay.
gets a
So so it's a technique. It's a technique issue you have
I'm
with
just
him.
saying go
But
to
what
the
I'm saying
hit the
is
biggest
the way you want to
offenders.
get everybody's
I think
attention. If you did it that way and markets just rolled along as awesome, do you think we'd be talking about it right now? Do you think we would even give a
yes,
shit?
yes
Should
you
we let
would.
We give a
Yes you
shit because
would.
everybody's in
No,
hyper
yes,
panic. You want everybody's
it would have
attention.
been so much more
I
effective.
disagree.
It would have been so much
should
more
we let
effective.
should we let Macro? I think Macro had his hand up, or some other Luke maybe.
Yeah, Macro, go ahead. Sorry, bud.
That's all good. We've moved on quite a bit from when I raised my hand.
Hey, can we go back to hands again? Great idea, because I know we've got some new speakers up here that want to interject in the conversation. And sometimes when we get more in these heated debates, which I love, other people kind of get shunned out because they're a little shy to jump in. So
I'll
hopefully
just
we
say
can,
one point
yeah,
before we
please
go to
hop
a
in here.
hand. Yeah, the one point that I would just say is if we can't have Nikes be under $700 without slave labor, then perhaps Nikes are not something we should aspire to have. That's all.
Yeah, agreed.
Here, here.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick comment. Won't take up too much time. Living in the old world, like being a common person to being financially stable. I remember that old world, and I can tell you, 90% of Americans have no clue what happened in the markets, and they could care less. The path that was put in front of those 90% of Americans was dismal, was a place of no hope. It's why suicide is going absolutely insane right now. People are killing themselves. People are on all types of Prozac and antidepressant meds, and they're just the common person is not doing well. The only people I hear bitching are millionaires and billionaires, and I don't really give a fuck. This has affected me financially. I don't give a fuck because I know what the common people are going through, and the path that was in front of them was going fucking nowhere, guys. There was nothing to look forward to. I'm willing to take a shot with Trump fucking being a bull in a china shop versus fucking choosing between Burger King and fucking McDonald's, aka
Hey, Nick, don't hold
Republicans and
back, buddy. Don't
Democrats.
hold back. Tell us how you really feel. No, you're really, I can feel your emotion in there, man. We try to just keep it a little bit more censored. No, no,
Nah, dude,
yeah,
listen,
we don't
Lauren,
mind.
Nick, I'm with
Yeah,
you,
no, for
buddy. I
sure.
got
Yeah, I didn't want
guys,
to
I got
detract
guys
from
that
your
I grew up
message
with.
at all. So,
I can't tell you how many guys have called me
Puncher talking over me, or am I
with
talking over
kids,
Puncher? Sorry, Punch.
Yes.
No, I didn't want to offend
Mhm.
Nick at all. I just wanted to let him know that like there's a lot of people that listen and their kids are in the background and stuff. So I
Oh,
definitely
sorry.
feel your no, no, no. You're good. You're good. I feel your emotion, and I think a lot of us definitely, sign off on that message. I think Robert definitely is somebody who puts out real data on what's going on in the country, and it's exactly what you're describing there, what the suicide rates are, life expectancy and all that stuff, the hollowing out of the middle class. So hey man, I didn't want to detract from your message, and I can tell you're super passionate about it, and I definitely sign off on it. And with that, sorry Puncher, I didn't know who was stepping on who there, but go ahead.
No, no worry. I just wanted I've been saying this since I've been on Spaces. The average guy is getting massacred. My friends that I grew up with, that I played t-ball with, that have kids that are struggling to make, car payments, mortgage payments. How much? Do you know how expensive it is to have your kid in a fucking baseball league? Sorry for the curse. So these guys are calling me and they're like, "Hey man," like swallowing their pride. "Hey man, can I borrow like 10 grand? I'll pay it back." I mean, it's awful. And these guys are hardworking guys. These guys who get up at the crack of dawn and work till 7 o'clock at night and bounce their kids on their knee and do it all over again. They are truly in a bad spot. So something's got to give. And to Nick's sentiment, like, I don't care that a couple big shots are losing money and they're screaming, on spaces in the morning about what an idiot Trump is. Something's got to happen. I don't know what the plan is, but something's got to change. And at least for the first time in my adult life or since ever, somebody's at least addressing the issue where no one
Hey,
else would.
Yeah, we're at least talking about it, right?
Puncher, how's it going? Uh,
Yes, sir.
I get that. I know I mean, the fiat system as a whole, it's fucked the middle class in a big way. But at the end of we still live in this fiat system, and you have to buy assets, and if you don't, you get smoked. So I just don't. I don't know how this resolves itself over time if we're still in this fiat
Well, there's
system.
no pain-free. Luke, everybody's looking for the pain-free way out of decades and decades of like malfeasance. My friends, what I tell them when I say you should buy Bitcoin? They're like, I don't have two nickels to rub together. Like, what are you talking about? I just called you asking for 10 grand. So I get it, man. Like, but you can't draw blood from a stone. Something's got to change. And I'm willing to at least entertain that there's a plan, and I'm willing to give a little bit of thread to
Hey,
let
Puncher,
them to let's see how it
can we
plays
get
out.
through some of these hands? Because I think we're kind of
Yeah,
bleeding
yeah,
over. I
sure.
don't know
Sorry.
who,
I think it
Terrence,
was
yours?
Robert first.
Robert? Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, then Karin, then Jesse.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, in general, the way the system works, it's very obvious who has benefited from the globalist experiment. Corporate profits track the trade deficit almost exactly. The net worth of the top 1% tracks the trade deficit almost exactly as a share of GDP. The S&P 500 people that hold financial assets, it tracks the trade deficit almost exactly. So as we hollow out the economy more, as we offshore and outsource more, these certain groups do better. Multinationals, people that hold financial assets, and kind of by transitive property, the top 1%. We know that's who benefits. Well, okay, now let's look at the other side. How is the average American doing? Well, their wages are down 80% in real purchasing power terms since 2000. So over the past 20 years, the average American that works for a living, their wages are down 81% in real purchasing power terms. So we know that they are not benefiting. Sure, they get to buy. Look, I always say there is not black and white. Sure, they get to buy a $250 flat screen TV on Alibaba, or right. So we get cheap Chinese trinkets, and that's cool and all. But like, I think the American people want more than cheap Chinese trinkets. And I think Besson is correct when he says, look, the American dream is not let them eat flat screens. It is real wage gains. It is your kids being better off than you were. And we don't have that. Like, objectively speaking, the KPIs for society are horrific, like unbelievably bad. And so whether or not, I kind of agree with Puncher, like, I don't really care how, oh, well, he should have done this and been nicer and did it more slowly, like all that kind of process stuff. Like, I couldn't care less. What I care about is the country that I love, that has turned into this hyper financialized, K-shaped, bifurcated uh, economy where people, me and my friends, can't get ahead, right? Like, that's what I care about. I don't care about how nicely or professionally or diplomatically he's going about, implementing this tariff or that tariff. Like, to Puncher's point, I just want it to change. I just need it to change, and I'm willing to support, and willing to support, publicly, their policies if they are moving in the right direction. And I think, like, look, there is no easy way out. And I wanted to point out, like, we're talking about the stock market and the effects, like Joe, I was agreeing with you, by the way, that the effects of a stock market decline in a hyper financialized economy like ours are tremendous. You guys touched on some, but like then you get into there's even more capex, right? That's tied to the stock price. Stock-based compensation, a lot of compensation with these multinationals and these mega caps is stock-based compensation, right? Like all the wealth effect. The two things I want to point out is one, if the stock market, because of how hyper financialized we are, the stock market falling, too much. I did a whole write up on this in I think 23. But I studied like the tax foundation. I read some of their reports, and they admitted themselves that capital gains were driving most of the revenue for the government. And in fact, as a share of GDP, they were hitting records. I think it was 9, 10, 11% in that range. So we are like ever more reliant on capital gains tax to fund the government. And the stock market basically had to go up. Well, what happens when it goes down? All that capital gains tax revenue goes away. Not only the wealth effect for individuals and corporations and all that, but for the government, their tax receipts, right, which are heavily dependent on assets going up and to the right, like we start getting into a situation where tax receipts might start falling significantly if this continues. I mean, even with the kind of extent of it so far, but if it continues another 10-20%, like tax receipts are going to take a huge hit. That blows out the deficit, that increases the deficit. And you can get into a real nasty kind of situation. So I think it's an important dynamic to point out, like just like a recession, right? Like if we are going into a recession, on average, recessions, increase the deficit as a share of GDP, which is how it matters, not a nominal number, as a share of GDP by 600 to 800 basis points. So 6 to 8%, the deficit increases. So if that is indeed where we're headed, our starting point is an utterly insane 7% of GDP deficit, pro-cyclical 7% deficit. That's a starting point, right? So like if we get into a recession, like, right, so I think that there are understandable kind of next questions or things that go a layer deeper that people are starting to talk about, and I think it's 100% valid. I would just say on a personal level that I am willing to endure. I have some stocks, right, and they're down, and like I'm willing to endure the small amount of money I have in my 401k going down if it means that the next 50 years, if it means that America can be built into something where number one, I can afford to buy a house and have a family, and number two, that I believe that my kid is going to grow up in a better world, a better economy than I had. That's like that rebirth, that golden age they keep talking about. Like if they are willing to actually go the distance, like I am 100% ready to publicly support them. And I'm not political. I'm not partisan. Like I'm critical of a lot of things about Trump, actually, but like this is one area where if they are really serious, there is no way to do this without significant pain, significant cost. It'll take time, like all these things. And I think that the political calculation is the most important and I'm not good with that. Like, I don't know what Joe thinks, but politically, like, this is a 5 to 10 year thing. How do they Joe mentioned midterms are just around the corner. Like how does all that play out? I think that's really the main question. I think it's clear Trump has some balls, to go the mat, as we saw from a couple days ago. But like the ultimate question is, to Joe's point, does Senate, right? You had Rand Paul and a Democrat talking about a bill to block and overrule these tariffs. So how does that play out? How does it play out politically? Like Trump can't run again, so does that make him more willing, less willing? Like that's really, I think, the question. But yes, there are definite significant consequences to asset markets declining in a hyper financialized economy, for sure.
Let's go to Karan.
Yeah, Rob. By the way, Robert, just to answer your question about the Senate, I mean, that is all on the Speaker of the House. If the Speaker takes it up, and I could carve more backbone out of a banana than that guy, but until and unless he takes it up, it's a non-issue. Go ahead. Who was it, Terrence?
Karan's been waiting. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, great. So a couple things. I just want to share a perspective. I think infra is so spot on, and I can give you guys a perspective of not just we always talk about the capital markets and the equity markets, but there's a much bigger market, which is the private companies, right? And as I'm in the private equity business, we have a bunch of portfolio companies, and all our portfolio companies are based in the U.S., primarily in North America, and almost all of them are in some way, shape, or form either directly doing manufacturing or they're doing kind of services with some wrap manufacturing. So this tariff thing has become very, very real. So I think the points that Infra made about I think when the stock market is down, it's got this multi-layered effect on the entirety of the economy. And when we have, and let's make an assumption the stock market's down because there's just a lack of clarity in terms of where we're headed because of policy. The way that directly impacts companies is he's spot on. CapEx. I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the call. We have a special purpose meeting on Tuesday. I'm flying all 6 of our CEOs down here in Miami to sit down and just really sit down and figure out how do we actually move forward with any of our CapEx plans, given that we have literally we don't have 2 months worth of visibility, let alone trying to put together ROI for a capital spend that's got a payback period of 5 years because we want to build a new facility. So it absolutely destroys the liquidity that goes into the system. And by the way, if we're not spending CapEx and growing our companies, we're not hiring people, right? So it's not just the corporate spend. Typically the cycle is very, very connected. So you are spending the CapEx, you're growing the business over a certain period of time, and as the company grows, you're hiring more people, and that has an effect on the jobs in the U.S. as well. So I think that's just a statement I wanted to make. The question I have for Infra is, so we hire all kinds of consultants to come and help us do work on what do we think some of the economic implications are, and this is specifically going to tariffs as a means to kind of get us back to making America great again. And this is going to be specific a bit more to the manufacturing side. One of the things that we get back time and time again, which is kind of getting away from the base economics to the actual proclivity of the U.S. laborer to work in domestic trade jobs as millennials. So I'll give you a couple examples. We're the largest providers of ballistic and laser eyewear. Proudly, we have a plant in Burlington, Vermont, of all places, and we make out all of this protective eyewear for our soldiers and for NATO allies. It's a semi-technical job. We've got presses and the stuff's getting manufactured the old-fashioned way, and we can never. We have a 20 to 30 headcount deficit at all times because we just can't fill the jobs, and when we do fill the jobs, and we pay top of the market. And the exit interviews and some of the stuff that we hear, it's like from the millennials, like, nah, this is not what I want to do, right? Like there's so this idea that we can bring back jobs the way it used to be in manufacturing. I think it's a noble idea, but I think there's some issues with it. It's like, who's going to fill those jobs? The labor market's preferences for the kinds of work they want to do have changed. Now the obvious answer is, well, Karan, it's not going to be people that fill those jobs. It's going to be AI, right? It's going to be robotics. Like, we are looking at that now, right? We're saying, okay, instead of having these 20 engineers that we need that are running the line, can we spend a bunch of capex and just take the human labor component out of it, simply because we can't produce at scale. So when we think about these tariffs, it's just like listen, man, I am a massive patriot. I love this country. I'm a first generation immigrant. It's like, I think it's the best fucking boat afloat, period, full stop. And I'll go to battle with anybody that thinks differently. But like, it's so nuanced. So these millennials, and I say this like I have a 21-year-old son, right? So there's been this massive shift in preferences of types of work that to assume that just because we can create jobs in the trades, all of a sudden we'll have the capacity, given what the labor force looks like, to fill those jobs. Like, that's not a foregone conclusion. So Infra, I really respect your opinion on some of these. Like, help me think through this. How do you
Yeah,
put that together?
we have my family owns a manufacturing company. It's not what I do for my day job, but I talk with my uncle and my mom who are high up in the company, and we're a domestic manufacturing company, and we hire a lot of young people in the factory. And we have a very cyclical business, so it's very kind of temp agency-y, where it's 2 or 3 months, and then it's not like a full-time position, but ultimately it comes down to the pay, right? And this was a question I was talking to them about since 2020, because we were, in my day job in healthcare, we were having so much issues filling positions, that I was curious about them. And it similar dynamic, right? And I think it comes down to a very simple kind of equation, which is when there is a supply demand imbalance, the price or the wage is the release valve. And just to take it to the kind of extreme to prove the point, if they're like, we had trouble filling the entry level positions, right? Which we normally paid like 16 to 17 an hour. But then they, printed 40% of the money supply, and 16, 17 wasn't enough anymore. And so, until we got the wage higher, there was just no one willing to work that job. So I think part of this story, when I keep talking about capital versus labor and who's being prioritized, like part of this story is rising. It'll be inflationary, like for sure. This will be inflationary, and it'll be disruptive. But part of, I think, the broader goal is to have higher, actual increasing real wage growth, and increasing purchasing power of wages. Like, I think that in that world, young people who are always dismissed as these lazy avocado toast eating people, like, no, it's like that the wages you guys are paying for the jobs that you're trying to fill are nowhere near enough to have a decent life. That's the problem. And so you take the wages higher, you raise the average American's real purchasing power of their wages. And I think a lot of those issues that a lot of people talk about, like you were referring to, I think a lot of those go away with much higher wages.
Yeah, I'll just very quickly on that. So I think that's partially correct. I do feel, and again, I think raising the price to a point where the price elasticity doesn't matter is certainly one of the valves. But and again, this is across infra, like 5 companies in 5 different states, right? Like, well, let me take a step back. Well, maybe we just haven't raised it enough, right? Maybe that's what it is, and that kind of gets into, like, you're also now starting to talk about the changing the consumer sentiment and consumer preference for what they want to pay. I think that's a different conversation, all in itself, and like how do you control that? But in spite of that, some of the exit interviews that we have done, and these are like performing people that were getting raises, it's been like this common thematic theme. It's like, well, I hate to say this, but like, and I'm talking about the really young labor force, right? The below 25, the below I'll say 28 labor force. It is not interested in putting widgets together. Just like they grew up with the internet, they grew up being influencers, they grew up with a completely different. So I think to just simply say that there's no cultural shift in the types of jobs Americans want to do, I think that's just kind of that's not being intellectually honest. Yeah, that's all.
No. I wouldn't say 100%. There's definitely a cultural element to it, 100%. I'm just saying that I think a major driver, at least from what we've seen, is the wage. Like, $16 an hour. Okay, we had real 40. The real inflation rate was 40%, right? So that $16 an hour job that we're now trying to squeeze and fill at like $17.50. It's like, no, that job should be 24, right?
Can I just
We
I have a couple of comments here. Sorry. I know y'all keep going back and forth. It's just I'm like chomping at the bit, and I threw a chart in the nest. Obviously, I think most of us have probably seen this as Bitcoiners. But I just can't agree enough with what you're saying, Robert. And just want to point out, so federal minimum wage in the 50s was $1.25, and that weight in silver equivalent now is about $25, right? So if you're paying $25 an hour to somebody now for, quote, equivalent minimum wage as to back then in real purchasing power terms, you get a lot more people interested in doing those jobs than whatever the federal minimum wage is currently, right? And so I think to excuse the profanity, but fuck you, pay me, right? Like if people get paid a wage that they can actually afford a life, they're going to be more willing to do the job. And then secondarily, as a millennial, I grew up getting hammered into my head the entire time I was in school. Go to college, go to college, go to college, go to college. Don't do trades, don't do trades, don't do trades. Go to college, go to college, go to college. Didn't matter what you did, just go to college, right? And so you're now seeing, I think, the impacts of that culturally, where everybody just goes, oh, well, I have to go to college, right? If I want to get a good job. Now, obviously, that's not panning out, and most people are getting screwed by that messaging. But the hard reality is you couple the complete bifurcation between productivity and compensation, and the fact that you've had multiple decades now of it being hammered into people's heads to just go to college and completely ignore trades. This is what you get, right? And so I
Well, macro, real quick. That was the academic industrial complex growing at
exactly
11% a year, lying
100%.
to you, and then parents thinking it was the 1990s and what they did, the normalcy bias. But I will tell you, like as an entrepreneur who has to hire people, I can't pay you in most of the jobs and most of my businesses. I can't pay that much for an entry level job. You want to know why? Because it doesn't pencil on my P&L, and I have to give a personal guarantee to the bank for the millions I have to borrow to start the company. Like it doesn't work. So
No,
there
look,
is no job
I get
created.
I get
So
that side of
we're
it.
we're up
I
against
get
the
that
wall
side of
here.
it. Don't get me wrong, because like what I do now, right, is I manage a book of business on behalf of a larger company that's about 5 million a year in revenue. I have service employees that work for me. I have a operating income I have to work within. Their salaries come out of that. I completely get it all, right? But at the same time, I see the profit that goes to the company, at least in my world, right? And it is well and above what we could afford to pay all of our people double and still hand plenty of profit over to the company with no issue at all. And this is a large Fortune 500 company, so it's a little different than the small businesses you're talking about. I understand that is not the case in a lot of the things, but this is a large multinational corporation that has a very healthy business. They could easily pay substantially higher than they do. And then we get constant feedback all the time of, hey, you know, you can't even do overtime for your service employees right now because our operating incomes have taken a hit because of this or that. And I'm sitting there looking at it going, no, we could absolutely pay their overtime right now if they wanted to work it. And so then you get this just resentment that builds up over time to where the service employees will call me and be like, hey, man, I'd like to work overtime, but they're not paying it right now, so I'll do that job tomorrow. And I can't blame them, right? I'm not on hourly. I'm on salary plus a comp for sales, so it's completely different for me. It doesn't matter if I work 10 or 40,
Well,
but
maybe recategorizing everything as
I
overtime
mean,
prevents it.
Yeah, but
this
hey,
is
but
hey, macro. Sorry, just want to jump in real quick here. So I think what you're talking about is factually accurate, and I would say, and again, this is just a personal experience thing, right? Like I've worked at a Fortune 500 at JP Morgan, but like the companies we deal with now are obviously a fraction of the size. These are 10, $12 million EBITDA businesses that we typically get into. So I think it's what you're describing in terms of there being, I'll call it super economic profitability for some of these larger corporations, and typically the ones that have a service component to it, just because the fixed costs are so. I think that's you're 100% right about that. And but I would also say, when it comes to the overall economy, which is primarily driven by these small, mid-sized businesses, that's an exception, not the rule. Like credit's tighter, the credit spreads that we have to pay to fund the companies are tighter, right? So
completely
so
agree.
like yeah, the one thing that I struggle with the most, and this is where I'm like, it's this constant fucking balance between the U.S. labor, right? Like the U.S. labor force, and like paying the appropriate wages, inflation adjusted wages for our laborers, and at the same time, it's the multi constituency problem where that labor is also a consumer, but the consumer doesn't want to pay what it's going to cost to buy the things if I
Because they
pay the
can't afford
labor
it.
what I want to
I
pay
mean,
them. I
dude,
know.
Yeah.
this is
The,
literally, guys, this is literally the freaking melting ice cube problem. And the
No,
Bitcoin
exactly.
is
It's the
the
monetization of
solution. Like
assets.
this
100%.
is Like, this
100%.
is what we're talking about. Like, you can't deal with these profit margins if you're the business. If you're the fucking employee, you can't fucking, it's broken. All of the money is broken. The ice cube is melting for everyone.
And this is the reason at the beginning of the call, every once in a while, I'm like, you know what? It's just time to hang it up and just buy some
I
Bitcoin
was just about to
and
say,
do
so
some
the
good in the
conclusion
world.
we've come to is buy Bitcoin. Okay, the space has come to the correct answer. We could all go home now.
This is what we
there,
do
there,
Word
literally
up.
there,
Well,
every
it's good.
single
there,
It's
day.
good. It's
there is
Everybody,
absolutely,
everybody.
great to
there's
talk it
absolutely
out.
no groupthink in all the Bitcoiners on this space at all.
Hey,
So, but
hey, guys,
appreciate the dialogue.
I actually had a question kind of for the panel, like bringing it back to all the people listening to this. Like, there's so much uncertainty, fear, pain happening right now. Like, can we just get a temperature check on like how we think this is going? Yes, like there's a ton of fear. The tariffs are just throwing a wrench in everything. Like, in my view, I'm still very excited, very happy. I'm with Rob. Like, I'm willing to go through the pain. I'm willing to go through the chop. But like, I think Joe's still in the room. Like, how close are we to like hitting the freaking wall, right? Like I feel like we've got some time here, and that there's a little bit of an overreaction to the tariff announcement. Like, we're only a couple days in on it,
The
you know.
problem with it is if you're driving looking in the rearview mirror, which is how most economic metrics work, you don't know when you're going to hit the wall until you've already hit the wall.
Fair.
Yeah, that's right. We do. I don't see this solution. I mean, I'm giving kudos for trying, but you could start an unwind that you can't put that Humpty Dumpty
If
back together again,
only there
and
was a
things really
neutral
spiral out of
reserve
control. But
asset
we're
that
there.
we could all use.
If only there was a neutral reserve.
I
Hey,
think
Punchy,
Yeah. So
Punchy
macro, I'm not
McPunchbowl,
worried about us.
Puncherson,
I'm worried about.
McPuncherson.
I'm
Hey,
worried.
Punch,
I'm worried
Punch.
about my buddies who can't buy
Completely
Bitcoin.
Punch,
agree.
can
Yeah.
we
Go ahead,
can
Loren.
we move to just start maybe tracking towards maybe ending? I think we had a good
You
theme
got
there.
51% of the vote as the host, buddy.
Love you too. No, I think we're at a good place, but
We
I
also got
did.
Gen X who just
Yeah, no,
jumped
I was
up
going to
real
get to
quick,
Gen
Lauren.
X, but give me 1 second because I also maybe wanted a little bit of a recap from Infra before we roll too, just on like the markets right now. Just I didn't know if we're still in Bloody Friday or whatever, but hopefully that, and then we'll go to Gen X right now. We'll go
Yeah.
around the horn again, and Gen X, sir, floor is
Gents,
yours.
hey, quick update. Difficulty adjustment is still on target to be pretty big. Have fun. Um, the topic you guys were talking about, I do work at a public high school. I run a women's athletic program. And I'm not talking about just my demographic. I've been funding this program since, all through COVID until now. I think I'm going to be able to, I think this might be my last year. I'm not sure. But I just wanted to share that when we talk about these things and the knock on effects of them, I have seen across several states that I'm in contact with different programs, there has been a severe reduction in the number of programs because people can't afford to run them. A lot of them are volunteer based. They're funded like parents by myself. It's not my career. I work in tech. Um, and the thing that concerns me, but on the bright side, the thing that concerns me is that that's going to continue because they're not increasing the amount of money for us that they're contributing to the schools. There's a lot of misspending. Some of you know. I'm not saying it's all bad, but there is a bright side to this, and I think I'm fairly confident that I will at some point be able to continue doing that purely because of my conviction in Bitcoin. And I hope that that's the thing that I hope a lot of other people understand is that other than your NGU, you know, what are you going to do? Because somebody's got to step up for your kid and for your community to help do some stuff. And that's something that I think concerns me because that it's been dropping severely. And if a lot of these kids don't have, an outlet, especially the boys, um, you're going to get other second order effects. But I think that the Bitcoiners, I hope, and the people that are smart and are in a position to do something more than just themselves, which is not me most of my life, still isn't entirely. I think that Bitcoiners will have a mind to do stuff like that because you're looking at a severe deficit happening right now.
Terence, what do you think? Take it around the horn, close this baby down.
Yeah, I think we've all arrived at the conclusion we arrive at every day, and that's to save
Buy
in Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
So it is time. Yeah, it's time to go around the horn. Do you want to start it this time, Lauren?
Why not? I shall go first and just say, hey, man, I love these discussions. There's a lot of different thought in here, and together, when we're able to do this in a respectful way, without name calling and getting on somebody for their opinion if it's not the same as yours, I don't really care about all that. I care about the truth, and so we're ironing these ideas out together, and hopefully. I see Bitcoin as one of the only tools and hopes for change, versus a lot of the other failing systems in our country, including politics and the legal system and the education system and so on. So for me, it's super exciting because it is the glimmer of hope. And I want to do all I can do for future generations while I have my little blip on the radar screen of time that is my life. So hopefully, my decisions are based on love and altruism and good for the future. So with that, I will concede and give it back to you, Terence.
How about you, Surfer Boy? We haven't heard from you. Any closing thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think Bitcoin's the answer at the end of the day. I mean, and also, if anyone thinks that Bitcoin is a cult, shit, nobody agrees on anything. My God. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. Loren, thanks. Terrence, thanks for doing the spaces. Um, Always learning a lot, and yep, keep it up. Stay positive.
Sometimes all surfers do have that certain sound in their voice, don't they? Hey, how about you, Macro?
Yeah, I would just like to say "F you, pay me" to those running the space. So, no, I think it was a really good conversation today, and I always like when we get into this topic because it is something that I'm very passionate about. Because similar to Robert, I grew up probably similar time span and in a small town, and I've seen a lot of the same things, and I don't think that the American dream is let them eat flat screens, and I would like to see something done about it. And I am also perfectly willing to have a little bit of market volatility in the interim, largely because I don't have a huge stock portfolio because I'm a millennial, and I don't think any of us have a huge stock portfolio. So if I see it go down 8, 10%, I'm like, interesting. That must suck for people with 401ks. I mean, I have one, but anyways, the sentiment is real, and I think it'll be interesting to see how Trump's approval ratings do if we have continued drawdown. If he still stays with pretty high approval rating, then to me that would kind of signal that most people are at a state of F it, burn it down. It's got to be better than what we were doing, which is a dangerous sentiment, by the way. I don't think that's a healthy thing for a society to maintain for very long, but it is where we're at nonetheless. And especially for people under probably 40, I would say, maybe under 35, a lot of them are there and have been there for a long time. And I just don't think people really realized it until very recently. And you see that sentiment on X. So, anyways, thanks for the conversation, guys. Always enjoy it.
Closing thought, Jesse, and then we'll go to you, Karan.
Yeah, happy Friday, everybody. I just wanted to say that I really do appreciate these rooms, Lauren and Terrence and Punch and everybody on the stage and all the people who make this stuff happen. It's to me, it's so wonderful that we can do this and like we can have these spaces and it's almost like a cross section of not just the US but the world because anyone can come in here. And I love how we have different voices on the stage and again, Lauren and Terrence and you guys, I think you do a great job of bringing different people up that have different perspectives, and it kind of gives me like a pulse on how we all actually feel. So I hope that people who are listening to this and the other panelists kind of get that same sort of feeling that I get out of it. I feel like these rooms draw me like gravity, just like Bitcoin draws me to it. So I think it's a really positive thing that we're all doing here, and it definitely helps me get through the days. I know there's a lot of pain, myself included. We don't need to all go into our personal stories for people to know that, and I'm just very grateful. So I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. I think we landed there toward the end of the talk today, which is great. So it sort of seems to naturally happen that we can come back to that core of look, Bitcoin can be the thing that keeps us stable and helps us get to the future. So just be brave through the chop, and appreciate you guys.
That one lasted almost a whole block, Jesse. Thank you for the words. It was good. Paran, you're up, and then we'll go to Punch Bowl.
Yeah, all right, I'll keep it quick. One of my old mentors used to always tell me when sitting in the markets, like, hey, in time of uncertainty, your best friend is perspective, right? And so I just want to leave this Friday with everybody. I mean, I know there's international folks on this call probably, but I mean, goddamn, we live in America. It's the best boat afloat. Most of us are still healthy, breathing. Hopefully, most of the people you love are still around and you can love on them. Go eat a nice fat steak. Go put your feet in the ground, and this too shall pass. And just remember to, practice a little bit of gratitude on days like today. That's all. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the conversations today.
Terrence, I got a super
All
fast one.
right. Go.
Ooh, Punchy. He's jumping in. He's doing back cuts. Okay, come on in, Gen X.
94.5% of all Bitcoin has been mined and is in somebody's hands. And you're in the early innings. Epoch 5. Come on.
Just a
Act
million to
accordingly.
go. 1 million to go. 500K in the next 5 years, basically.
Yeah,
So
it's good perspective. And to Jesse, Jesse's grateful and gratitude is the key to happiness. Richest people I know who aren't grateful are miserable, and the poorest people I know who are grateful are happy. Um, I thought 2008 was it. I started buying gold and silver because I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to kick this can. And I worked really hard to understand what was going on. It was kind of my awakening. Well, I was wrong. And almost, gosh, 2 decades later, I think we might be at that actual point. Like the amount of levers they can pull and tricks they can pull are coming to an end. There are people out there who don't know about Bitcoin. So I consider it almost a mission to let them know about it and get them in the life raft. But I do think that we're coming up on the, you know, hard times make strong men phase of things. And I know in my life, the hardest things that I've ever gone through are the things that made me who I am and gave me what I hope is the character that I have and the ability to overcome things. So we can overcome things. This too shall pass, like Karan said, and everybody have a great weekend.
Thomas, you joined just in time to give your closing thoughts for today.
Yeah, this is an interesting space today, just talking about a bunch of stuff. But I am, like I say, I'm a little apprehensive or concerned about how things are playing out. I get that there's chaos. I totally appreciate like Robert and the perspective of the younger people who say, "Fuck it, I don't care. I need this place fixed, and if we break some eggs, so be it." I'm totally on board with that. My issue is I want to have some semblance. I don't want to telegraph the details of the plan, but to have a broad stroke plan so people understand. Because I would just tell you, the clients that I'm talking to, I'm working with two large CPG companies right now, and the level of chaos that's been going on with these tariffs right now, it's really messed up everything. And I see like slowdowns in strategic decisions. As Karan said, and I see it in the clients, it's freezing capital investment for strategic investments. So next week we'll see, maybe this all goes away. The second thing I would just plant a seed for us to think about is when the financial markets move this much, the derivatives get mispriced or they get out of whack. And we know we don't really talk a lot about the derivatives, but the derivatives market is very big, and that has the ability to cascade capital calls, margin calls, and something to pay attention to. I don't know enough about it. I just know that it's big, north of a quadrillion, and there's lots of potential risk there as markets move quickly.
That was quite the closing thought, Thomas. Thank you. Appreciate all of you. Another great conversation. We all know it's Bitcoin, not crypto, and we are so ridiculously early. I know quite a few OGs from 2013, 2014. They thought when Bitcoin was 300 to 400 bucks that they were late. And what if we had a 400,000% rise since then? And we are still just so early, less than 1%. I think we're down to 0.2% right now of adoption. So let's just keep spreading the truth, spreading good information, getting rid of misinformation, disinformation, and just focus on Bitcoin. That's really all we need to
Terrence,
do.
I just wanted to plug
No,
real
I'm
quick.
still talking. Lorenzo, I don't know what just happened. That was really weird. I was
Uh-oh.
talking.
Who's daddy with the
What just
belt
happened?
now?
What?
I know, man. Who's daddy with the belt now? It was me
Okay.
yesterday. Today it's you. I can hear it snapping away. No, I just want to quickly plug that these things will be restreamed on your favorite podcast app pretty soon due to requests of people saying, "Hey, I wanted to listen, but I didn't want to sign back into X and stuff." So, we're in the process of trying to upload these fairly soon after they're done onto podcast apps, just so people can listen to them later. Sorry, Terrence, I didn't mean to
Yeah, just
just
don't
jump all over
dubstep
your.
on my closing words.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh,
All right.
it's all good. All right, guys. See you Monday. Monday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific.